So you asking for
Data request.
Yeah, we hadn't had it. I got it, so
That's good.
yeah.
So
The last.
Should be right. So
Well, and this is kind of
Mike, why?
like a term, one sponsor project that I think would be two Stafford helpful Stafford rep for you to, because of that, it passed. You can, once we've got past the NTD thing, like a brainstorm, like how they do this using GIS and. Yeah. Like, he's doing like the asset mapping, TIE, like total integrated something.
I mean, it often is at 9:30.
But create a small repository for just planning about
It always helps.
data.
Yeah.
And yeah, but I just heard the aircon.
Pass your miles, have it on Power BI. You don't have, go into the APC portal, go into the there and make reporting like log in.
I don't want to get.
I need
you might guess
station level boarding data for the past 3 years.
they're late. That's
And then
well,
even
All that we the bylaw.
bonus,
They
these
want to.
originally
2 minutes grace.
get a data set that works.
Amendment.
And then you create an open data
So we're not gonna.
then the world can pull theory data if they want.
How long does it?
That's a little bit more
You didn't send them.
politics behind that because, we have to make sure that we're
That's
presenting data in the way that we
didn't say
it to be, that we want it to look, and that looks with our like CEO or our annual after.
I got them a week.
Yeah.
So they can do this. Alternative vehicles and all.
transportation.
Pass down.
That's just fancy.
Myself, and then we'll
But I'll leave that.
pass around.
I may be here. Lady, faster.
There you go. So.
A full agenda setting.
And say
Take a look.
it's morning.
Morning, Paul. You're here early.
Yeah.
You should be able to pass them around.
I will do that. Thank you.
Oh, thanks.
How was your weekend?
Fine.
Good, thanks.
Go your way.
You're welcome. Jeez, I made a fatal mistake. I never been to
So,
let me just
gentlemen.
get it right. I went to get a quick snack on Sunday night at the
Ladies.
Glory Days Grill in Arlington. And
A lot of stuff.
I did not realize.
It's a nice camping trip this weekend.
Like 20
But yeah.
television screens and everybody.
Last week was.
I was like, wow, not a quiet Sunday evening.
Oh, wow. Oh, data centers, that's
Yeah.
all the way down here.
It is, but
So-
football season is everything crazy.
All right, I will call this meeting to order, a couple minutes late at 9:04 a.m. Do I have a roll call and determination of quorum?
Second. Houlihan.
Here.
Paul Agnello.
Here.
Jacob Jackson. Tom Ament.
Here.
Brian Council. Mike Fincham. Melody Fowler. Here. Amy Garbarini is online. Kate Gibson. Here. Stephen Haynes.
Here.
Christine Hoffner. Daniel Koenig. Nick Miner. Stephen Miner. Nick Ruiz.
Here.
Bob Schneider. Michelle Shropshire. Rodney White.
Here.
Capella Kari. Lee Anderson. Mohammed Ben Ammar. Chelsea Batis. Kimberly Cook. Mike Craig. Adam Derrick.
Here.
Todd Horsley. Cassie Lord. Jacob Pastwick. Craig Pennington. Craig Reed. Joe Stainsby. Quorum is present.
All right, awesome, thank you. Moving on.
Jamie sent a notice that she's running a few minutes late, so she should be in 5 minutes.
And could you also add William Montgomery, PRE intern, to the role as well?
All right, moving on to item number 3. I do have one amendment to the agenda. This will be on item number 8C, CMAC SDG project selection process. We need to add an endorsement and a resolution to this item so that we can endorse the CMAC and SWG project selection process, as well as the carbon reduction, I guess. Do I have a motion or any other discussion?
Just a comment, this under consent. We'd like to pull the call for CMAC and SPG project, and then move that basically with the rest of the CMAC and SPG items.
Okay.
Under C.
That works. All right, so we have two amendments to the agenda, moving item 6B under item 8C and adding an endorsement to item 8C. Do I have a second? Any discussion? All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Motion carries. All right, review of the August 21st, 2023 Policy Committee meeting.
Mr. Chair, I propose that we don't do this. I am happy to do it if a majority want it done, but I've been thinking about this the last couple of months, and honestly, by the time we get to the TAC meeting, old news, some of you have attended online and watched the proceedings, the videos are online, the agendas are online, but it's up to the TAC. If you wish me to do what I usually do, a 5-minute summary for you, I'm happy to do that. But I'm also happy to skip it and not include it every month in the agenda, because it seems to me to be that, you know, nobody hardly ever asks me a question about it. I kind of do this every month. It wastes 5 minutes or so of your time. How do you feel about this? Do you want me to keep doing it, or do you want me just to skip it? I don't need to add items on your agenda for my own health. If it's important, I will, but I'm not sure how the body feels.
So I guess my comment is I don't know that we need like a blow by blow of the entire meeting. I'll say if there is something significant that impacts the TAC, I think it might still be helpful to mention that.
Decision taken by the policy committee or a new item you haven't seen.
Right.
Okay.
I mean, like there was like the RTA discussion. Want to talk about that?
Sure. So just quick one on that. The policy committee has decided to do a workshop on future funding at the next policy committee meeting, which will be this month in September the 18th. And University of Mary Washington have prepared a basically a memo looking at what would happen in this region if we had an RTA and using the different models that are currently in use in Virginia, the one in Northern Virginia, the one in Richmond, and the one in Hampton Roads, as well as the McPike proposal that was submitted. Traditionally, FAMPO has tried to stop the process of this Virginia House, Senate adopting any proposals on a regional transportation authority for our region, mostly because we've never been consulted by anybody. And as a regional body, we feel like we should at least be part of that conversation and not have it decided for us without us, if you use the old terminology. And so the feeling is that we should have a discussion about a possible regional transportation authority, because it's going to be dumped again in the legislature. Presumably a number of candidates for the House and Senate in Virginia have talked about their support for such an idea, and presumably they will write up their own piece of legislation and dump it in Virginia's House or Senate this coming round. And it's better that we are forewarned and prepared rather than go into it and, you know, have a mad phone call scramble to try and stop something. Secondly, we also need to talk about future funding for transportation projects in the FAMPO region, and whether that's done through increased applications to federal grants or state grants or other means, or possibly using a transportation authority, or a mix of all of the above. So there's going to be a workshop. There's no decisions coming out of the policy committee anytime soon on any of that, but there will be a workshop at the meeting to just talk about what options are available and what general feelings are about those options. So that's the item that's going to be on the policy committee agenda. When that document is been reviewed and so on, we will bring it to the TAC as well for people to look at and discuss and so on. And I can also bring those slides if we have slides for that particular meeting on funding. So that's where we are with that item. Mr. Chair?
Yep. All right. We can move on to item number 5, public comment. Do we have anybody in the room or anybody on?
Can I just, sorry, see by show of hands, how many of you are happy with that process, that I only highlight important decisions taken or items you've not seen before that have some significance that I would remind you of them at the TAC meeting?
I think
Everybody like that? Okay, thank you.
All right. Item number 5, public comments. Comments and questions from members of the public are welcome at this time. And if there are any public comments online, nothing? All right. Anybody in the room? Okay. All right. Close the public comment period and move on to item number 6, the consent agenda. A note, we pulled item 6B and moved it under the rest of the agenda. So this is just for the approval of the August 7th, 2023 TAC meeting minutes.
should be approved.
Motion, do I have a second?
Second, Jamie.
Any discussion? All right. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? All right, motion carries. Moving on to item number 7, tip amendments and modifications. There are 4 items under this.
John?
Good morning. So we have a few modifications that we're just bringing to your in front of y'all, because some of these were not included in the last type. It kind of came in just after, but were put in front of the policy committee as informational. Again, modifications don't require any action, but handle. It's adjusting and just moving around funds in the previous tip. We should go to the next one. We are also doing a modification, moving some of the group traffic and safety operation funds around. So there's a small amount of funding, about $5 million being moved here. That's for information. I'll go to the next one. Resolution 2406. This is the bigger one. This for the amendments that are currently open for public comment. We have a wide range of projects, including the river crossing study. Can you scroll up real quick? I'll just read the title. Amendments to the Smart 24 Route 1 and Exit 126 improvements, as well as the Star Study improvements. So these are adding or increasing, are adding a project as well as adding additional ones projects. And finally, we have a Virginia Department of Passenger Rail amendment where we're looking to actually start adding a 3rd track to the process. Down to the bottom, actually provide a map to allow you all to have an area. So we're adding this project to our 24-27 tip.
John, the first 3 are a request of VDOT and the last one is a request of VPRA, correct?
Correct.
And we are only approving B, C, and D. It looks like item A is for information.
Just C and D, because those should be the ones that are amendments. Modifications do not require.
Okay. Item B is listed as an endorsement and action item.
Chair, some of these the TAC has already seen,
Yeah.
but because we've grouped additional ones together with those, you're seeing some of them a second time. So
we are approving B, C, and D then.
yes, and
Okay.
A is for information only.
Paul?
So I have 2 questions. One is basically with UPC 119, 112. That's mentioned under A as well as C. So I guess the question is, why is it under twice? And then I guess with the groupings for C, we don't approve the river crossing project. So we request that be kind of pulled out for resolution 2406. So we have a separate vote on that.
Okay. At least for 119, let's just say the modifications and amendments. This was requested by VDOT to administer these. Apparently, they needed to make a change in the existing and then make an amendment. They needed to correct an existing issue that was there, and then they wanted to amend it. And so it's just bringing clarification into that.
So it was requested in that particular order by VDOT, and they specifically asked us to do it in that order. So I'd have to defer to VDOT for more detail. If you need more detail.
That detail you just gave is very accurate.
So there were two different actions. It wasn't the same action.
One was to make a correction in the existing one, and to be transparent that that was an error, or not necessarily error, but inaccurate. Then they're gonna make the the amendment to basically, let's correct it for transparency, and then amend it. So I'm guessing, don't quote me, is when they amended, they realized there was an issue, and so they need to bring that, correct it, and then amend it.
In the interest of time, any further discussion? All right, so Paul, we are item B, C, and D. We want to do it separately, right? Okay.
I would say ask for approval for B, C, and D, excluding the river crossing, and you can vote for them all at once, and then you can vote on the river crossing separately if you.
So do I have,
Good to me.
yeah, do I have a motion for item B, resolution 2405, item C, 2406 minus UPC 123908, and item D, resolution 24-07?
A motion to approve.
Second?
Second.
All right. Any discussion? All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Motion carries. And then an endorsement of item C 2406 with UPC 123908. Do I have a motion?
Motion.
With it, included.
Yeah.
Including,
Second.
All right. Any discussion? All right. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed?
Yay.
All right. Motion carries. Thank you. All right. Moving on to action discussion items number 8. So item A, endorsement of resolution 2408, approving a public comment period for an amendment to the SEEP.
if we can just pull this up. I've been asked by the TAC chair and a couple of TAC members that we do away with reading every word for word through written comments that are received by the public, and to include them as a public comment document on the email agenda for the policy committee meeting. And I then suggested also a printed copy attached to the printed agenda for the policy committee meeting, because they feel that we're getting a lot of the same person writing the same comment every month, and it's not a lot new, and they feel it's a time waste to read word for word through them. Workshop this with staff, and FAMPO staff generally feel that we shouldn't abandon it altogether, but staff should read a one-sentence summary for each of the written letters, so that at least on the record we've got a one-sentence summary of each of the written comments received by the policy committee. In any event, in order to make such a change, we do have to amend the SEEP. We can't just decide to change the policy when our policy document, which is the Community Engagement and Equity Plan, actually tells you to do it a certain way. So that is the SEEP amendment for that particular item that we're proposing. I believe there's a second amendment on this SEEP as well, and that is to do with the TIP amendments, which you just voted on us a moment ago. The SEEP requires a 30-day public comment period, and what we are frequently having is 2 policy committee meetings that are not exactly 30 days apart. They're 27 days apart, or 26 days apart, or 28 days apart, which then means you can't open the call for public comment in, say, the August meeting and then approve those items in the September meeting. You've got to wait till the October meeting. And if we receive applications via VDOT or DRPT or somebody else, it can come from one of our transit agencies, etc., like VRE or Fred or what OmniRide. It takes more than 2 months to then make a TIP amendment, and if if they are urgent and the particular agency needs it because it's holding up a project, say a roadway project that needs to commence, we then have to call a special policy committee meeting, or we've got to ask the policy committee to defer that decision to, or not defer, delegate that decision to the policy committee executive, which still has to meet in person because we can't have any online meetings at the policy committee currently because we don't have a state of emergency. And so the attempt here is to make the process slightly shorter for public comment. We typically, by the time we get to a TIP amendment, we've already had public comments on a particular new project. If it's a brand new thing, when that goes through the system, we get public comments. Like a study. If a project is in a study, the public comment during the study, and we've put on quite a big effort to get public comment during those phases. When we get to the TIP amendment, it dies. Nobody's interested anymore, and we put out the stuff for public comment. We don't get any public comment. The reason we're proposing 20 days and not 21 days, which sounds like the obvious thing to do, is because of the month of February. When you get to the month of February, John has sat with a calendar and gone laboriously month by month through the calendar for the next couple of years. And every time we hit February, there isn't 21 days sometimes between policy committee meetings. So to cater for February, the proposal is to make it 20 days instead of 21 days for a TIP amendment. We're not changing the public comment period for anything else. So if we amend the LRTP, it's still 30 days. If we amend the other FAMPO documents that have specific days, they stay where they are, right? It's only for TIP amendment where we don't really get any public comment anyway. So that's the two proposals that we're making today. I'm very happy to hear comments and input.
I just wanted to know, when somebody or citizen comes over here and he voiced his concern about a project as a public comment, how do you respond? Do you respond back to them? And what is the procedure? You get him out, doesn't have to come discuss it again, or you address his concern. How do you deal with that?
So in terms of the way the bylaws of FAMPO are set up, public comments that are delivered in person or verbally online are there for either the TAC or the policy committee to hear, and hopefully will influence their decision on that particular project. The bylaws do not allow us in a meeting to respond to the person speaking in the meeting. So we don't, and as staff, we don't. If we get a written comment, what our public engagement officer does is reply to the written comment, thanking the person for their written comment and telling them that we putting it into the pack for the TAC meeting or policy committee meeting, or that we're going to read it out in the meeting, or whatever the particular instruction is. Take instructions from the policy committee if they wish us to respond to a particular letter in a certain way, right? Staff don't make up responses. We just communicate with the person to say, thank you for your comment, we've received it, we have submitted to the relevant committees and so on, so that they get some feedback that we've done something about it. But we don't, as staff, because sometimes it requires us to take a position, right? Oh, we don't like Spotsy's widening a road, we don't like it, stop. We don't get involved in that because it's up to the Spotsy representatives on the TAC or the policy committee to respond to that. We don't take a position. So FAMPO staff don't take positions on projects, but we do, when we get it in writing, we do respond back and say, thank you, we are taking it to the relevant committee. It's up to you guys or to the policy committee members to decide on individual responses if you wish to make those, or to give us an instruction to please go ahead and, send a particular response, but staff don't make up responses.
Does the public comment period here listed for TIP meet VDOT guidelines? If there are VDOT guidelines for the public comment?
Staff looked into that and no problem was proposed.
So I guess, hold on, comment, what's the justification for 20-day versus just saying 3 week and making it 21 days? It would never be, you'd never have a meeting sooner than 3 weeks, right?
I thought I explained that every February it happens because February.
Oh, okay, yeah.
Number of days, except for maybe a leap year, but other than a leap year, February is quite short, and then that's when it runs into problem. So we could do 21 days, but then, and the rest of the months of the year, we'd be fine, but we're likely to run into a problem every February.
Okay. Is there any further discussion on this item?
So I have one quick question, and I don't have any issues with the changes, but with like, there used to be like a public participation. Is this plan like superseded that?
Yes, the SEPA superseded the public engagement plan.
Okay.
So we have all our processes in one document. So we don't have to go and look for the plan for TIP and the plan for whatever. It's all in the one document. And if it's not in the document, then we don't have. One of the things that we need to clarify with VDOT is what is a modification and what is an amendment, because sometimes it's a modification, but VDOT still wants a resolution because somebody higher up the food chain wants a resolution. So that part is a little bit unclear to us, and we've been doing it on a case-by-case basis this year, and I feel we should tidy up that, what VDOT requires, because VDOT sometimes has a slightly different requirement to our typical process.
Mr. Chair, I just want to say, I don't know if we're going to go through the changes line by line for voting, but I am against having the public comments posted in the packet and not being read aloud. I think based on my experience that it's a little bit discriminatory. So those who can't get here because of work, or those who can't engage because of a disability, or those who just don't want to be here for 5 hours, still should have the opportunity to participate with a time period that cuts it off like the other meetings, like 3 minutes or whatever it is. So my recommendation, if we go through this, is to go item by item, because I'm not in favor of
Sure.
We can,
one.
I guess one question for Coley. Do we, when we're reading public comment, only do 3 minutes?
Yes.
But 3 minutes per
Yeah.
letter. So if we have a controversial item, which is quite likely, you may get 50 letters, and so you read 3 minutes per 50 letters. That's going to make it a 7-hour meeting, not a 5-hour meeting. So there is that concern.
All right, so we will split resolution 2408 into 2 items. I'll look for a motion for the first item, which is approval of the changes to how we read public comments.
So just scroll down to the text, Coley, so we can look at the text.
That item right there.
So the compromise that staff proposes is we attach to the email agendas and the printed agendas, and then we read a brief summary, not read nothing, which is what I was asked.
Oh, you're saying read the summary.
Well, the policy committee asked me to change it to just printed copies. So FAMPO staff very strongly said to me they don't like that. They want staff to read a short 1 sentence or 2 sentence summary of each.
Oh, I'm good with that. Sorry.
So this is a compromise that FAMPO staff
I'm on this planet.
literally forced me to make.
All right, so we will have an endorsement for all of resolution
Yes.
2408. Do I have a motion?
A motion to approve.
Again.
All right, any discussion? All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? All right, motion carries.
Correct me. I'm done.
All right, moving on to item 8B, PL funding scenarios.
There's a handout that got stuck at the
So I draw your attention
handout.
to also this handout.
You got 1 page.
Just to explain the context while Becky's just checking that you've got a copy of the printed version. I can just explain the context. Every 10 years, we have the Census Bureau publishing
No, you did it.
the official urban areas. The Census Bureau publishes the official urban areas of, according to criteria which tend to change, and this year they changed, well, this cycle they changed significantly. Federal DOT and federal highways then agree on what they consider the urbanized areas. And I use urban areas and urbanized areas because they're 2 different. Census Bureau says this is urban and this is rural, right? The federal transportation bodies then have to make a decision as to what they consider the urbanized areas for funding purposes. And what they've tended to do is adopt exactly what the Census Bureau does because it's less controversial. However, they're not required to do that. They just have to decide what the urbanized areas are for funding formulas. So they've chosen this year again to just adopt what the Census Bureau says and to apportion the funding for MPOs, etc., and other forms of funding across the United States using the urbanized areas that the Census Bureau approved. It affects housing money, economic development money, and it includes, in our case, transportation funding for the MPO. Now, the way this process then unfolds is that VDOT, in our case, is meant to have a consultative process to decide on how the money allocated to the state should be divided up between the MPOs. And this is the money we use, remember, to pay salaries of staff, to pay our portion of the rent for the building. It's all the operational expenses, in this case, of this particular funding source. It's PL funding. The process that VDOT is required to follow is that I understand the state makes the decision as to how to allocate the funding. It is in the state's purview, not the MPO's purview, how the money is divided up. So we don't get a vote in how the money is divided up. However, the legislation says it has to be a consultative process. So they're required to inform us of the options they're looking at and required to discuss it with us and required to then inform us of what the decision is. But just remember that we don't get a vote. We only get to give comments. Now, when this was proposed to us as MPOs, they asked us if we could give them an answer in 1 week. So I, being the quiet, shy person that I am, said, under no circumstances will I give you an official comment in 1 week because I would have not been able to consult anybody in 1 week. So I stopped that and they agreed across the state of Virginia to give us 30 days to comment, right? And so this meeting today and the policy committee meeting occurs within that 30 days. So I have effectively changed the process and forced them to have a slightly more consultative process because A, I wanted you to be involved, and B, I want the policy committee to be involved. There's a very good reason why I want you and the policy committee to be involved. 2 good reasons. The first one is it affects the funding of our staff and our operations, the building and all that sort of stuff. So as inflation goes up, we have to deal with that out of this funding pot. And as staff salaries go up over the years, we have to deal with it out of this funding pot. The second reason is, remember, there's a small local match that gets paid as dues, and a portion of those local dues get used to match these funds. And I believe it's a 10% match. It's not a 20% match like you have with infrastructure. It's a 10% match. But the dues paid to GWRC, which are used to match this funding source for FAMPO, have not been increased by GWRC or the jurisdictions for many years. It's calculated on the basis of a per person fee, but the rate has not been increased for many years. And across all programs that are administered by PDCs, there have been small increases happening every year. So we're getting now to the level where the local match would need to be increased if the PL funds are increased. Also with other programs, economic development programs and housing programs, again, the match is going to have to be increased soon because those programs have been going up 2%, 3%, 4% a year, and we've reached the end of the line as to how much match is available. So those 2 very good reasons. I felt we should have a little more discussion about this than what VDOT head office originally wanted, but they've kindly agreed that we can do that. So that's a very long explanation. Looking at the table, this is a table constructed by VDOT head office of options, right? And you can see there on those options that the 2024, using the existing formula, gives that amount of funding Pampo, it would be $405,000 per year. We then, last week, finally got the proposed 2025 numbers, and they then show you Fredericksburg, it would increase to $413,000. So it's a very small increase. And then there's 6 scenarios. The first 3 scenarios are using the same basic formula, but changing the base. And the base means that before you calculate for each MPO what the dollar value would be, you first have to take off a minimum amount that gets paid to all MPOs. And the reason for that is we have some very small MPOs who still have to do the same amount of federal documentation, federal processes, etc. One MPO was getting like $5,000 for the whole MPO, and so there is a need to have a base just to cover those very small MPOs that need a minimum amount of money, because with $5,000 you can't employ even a staff member. So that's why that is. The rationale that was explained to us for increasing that base to $75,000 or $100,000 is that seems to be what the states around us are doing. Tennessee is doing that, and I believe North Carolina, I think, was the other one. I stand corrected on that, but anyway, they do a $100,000 base or a $150,000 base. But if you do that, that gives you those 3. Now, there's a lot of screaming going on about the proposal, particularly from some of the larger MPOs like Hampton Roads, because you remember our concern about the Census Bureau's determination of what is an urbanized area. Do you remember we wrote letters, we protested, we were not happy because we were worried that this screaming was going to happen. And guess what? The screaming is happening. Lucky for us, Pampo's official urbanized area population has gone up by 40,000 people. Lucky for us. We didn't get anything chopped off. Hampton Roads MPO has lost an entire county because the new methodology is chopped off. I think is it Suffolk, and Fauquier County has given notice they're leaving the TPP in Washington because they're no longer connected to the Washington DC urbanized area because of the changing methodology. So the larger MPOs are upset because they're losing funding. In most of the scenarios, Hampton Roads loses about $100,000, and they're saying that they've committed a budget years in advance and they've hired staff, and now they're getting their budget cut. 1 or 2 of the smaller MPOs have also lost funding based on the scenarios because their population has shrunk, right, in their urbanized area. Now remember, no one's actually moved their house. It's just that the Census Bureau has decided, no, those are not urban anymore. Those are now rural.
Is Danville still a MPO?
Yes.
No.
No,
50,000 population. Right?
no MPOs have been forced to shut down. The federal guidance is that they can continue to remain as MPOs, and that this might be a blip on the horizon, that next time the Census Bureau may change the criteria again. So no MPO has been asked to close down, even though some of them, they no longer have 50,000 people in their official urbanized area. And we have cross-border MPOs, 3, I think 3 or 4. Obviously, Washington, D.C., in Virginia, D.C., and Maryland, but we also have like one that's got
Kingsville.
Yeah, they have a few hundred people in Virginia, but they've got thousands of people in Tennessee, right? Because their MPO crosses the state boundary. It's very complicated. To make this a little briefer, those are the 6 scenarios there, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. The first 3 are using the same methodology, just increasing the base. The next 3 have a slight change in that we have got the Petersburg MPO, which was taking a portion of the Richmond funding to fund themselves. So they didn't get any base. Their base was zero. And the proposal is to give them a base the same as everybody else. And then there's a final scenario which just arrived over the weekend, which is why it's not in your pack. Vampo has decided to come up with their own proposal, but not all of Vampo. The Vampo executive makes this proposal, and it's going to be discussed this afternoon at the Vampo Board of Directors meeting. So we haven't even discussed it yet, but I don't have another TAC meeting to show this to you, so I'm showing it to you now. And this proposal basically is trying to prevent any MPO getting a reduction in funding. So what they've done is fiddled the numbers to try and smooth the transition so that you don't have too many MPOs losing funding. So there's like basically Hampton Roads loses 3% and everybody else has a slow increase, but you can see there the percentages.
In the interest of time, does anyone have any discussion, questions, thoughts on the proposal? I think in either the 6 above or what was presented in the paper in front of us.
Those are the 6 options.
So it appears that any of the 6 options would be beneficial. It's just that some are more beneficial to this region's body and some are a little bit less, right? And so no matter which option Vampo goes with, it's going to benefit us.
I mean, the one that was
all of the
printed out is pretty good.
All of the options, including the printed out one, show that Vampo gets increased PL funding over time. I mean, in some cases, not very much increase, but it is an increase over time. But just the warning is that there'll be a small need, or there'll be a need for a small increase in the match funds from the jurisdictions to match that, because if we don't match it, we can't get access to the funding.
So I would assume by the time of the policy committee, there should be a preferred scenario.
Well,
Or does staff?
Or
Vampo would have a preferred scenario, which is, I think, this one. Across the state, no, because they're waiting for feedback from us.
So does, as Jamie's question, does staff have a preferred scenario?
We don't feel exceptionally strongly because all of the scenarios give us greater funding. I prefer scenarios 1, 2, and 3. I don't like 4, 5, and 6 so much, but that's just my personal opinion, right? I haven't asked the staff to give a recommended one, and the one in paper has only come over the weekend, so I've just seen it.
And maybe perhaps, maybe you can do it off the top of your head today, but if not, for policy committee, maybe include the information on how much the match would increase. That's probably the that they will.
That is very, very complicated because
know,
the match increase doesn't only affect FAMPO, it affects all of the GWRC programs, which are not part of FAMPO. So it's very hard to say, but the answer to your question is slightly different. GWRC have already proposed an increase that would take care of most of this, and it's already in the pack for the GWRC board meeting, so they know about it already.
Okay. Anyone else have any discussion, questions, comments, concerns?
If there's any scenarios that you think you don't want to be the outcome, then tell me, then I can suggest that to the policy committee. But all of those seem to indicate a small increase to FAMPO depending on which option they choose.
And the paper in front is $100,000 by 2027, which is pretty good. All right. You don't need anything else from us, or?
Unless somebody has a comment about please don't do number 7 or something, we can move on. Just don't want to feel like people weren't consulted.
If anyone does have any comments after the meeting, they should send an email by.
I need it by Wednesday. When are we sending out the policy committee agenda, Becky? Oh, they're having a discussion. By Wednesday.
By Wednesday. Okay, so if anybody has any further comments, please email Ian by lunchtime on Wednesday. We will go further from there. All right, moving on to item 8C, CMAQ SCBG project selection process final. A reminder, there were 2 amendments to this item. One was moving the call for projects that was previously on the consent agenda under item 8C, as well as adding an endorsement or resolution under item 8C for the project selection process.
Can just speak to the endorsing the call for projects before John gets into the criteria. We wanted to bring the call for projects earlier partly because I'm going to be away for a period in November, December, when the period would close. But so I called around and asked everybody's opinion that makes up the core voting members of FAMPO, and we just didn't get a clear path forward. So we decided to just leave it as the methodology says, which is that the current methodology says the first policy TAC meeting in September would be the call for projects. And I put that to the policy committee at their meeting, and they endorsed that we just follow that methodology and start in September. So officially today would be the start of the call for projects. All seem to not want us to put that in the consent agenda, so I assume there's some discussion that needs to be had.
And John, knowing we've went through a majority of this and everybody has it, just keep it brief, and then we can jump to discussion.
Can we just hear what the issue is with the call for projects?
Oh, yeah, we can do that first.
So I guess I just had kind of a question, like one of the basic questions was kind of like the call for projects is like FY30. And we've talked before, like just whatever monies are available. I understand most of it's like FY30, but if there's, money that's available in 25, 26, that would be available too. I just wanted to clarify that we were basically not doing a call for projects just for FY30.
So
We are.
John?
So we are doing call for projects for FY 28 and 29 for Stafford County's TMA. So for those years, only Stafford is eligible to apply for those funds. So those are actually opening for that. So if you're on Stafford County, just put an application for those. Otherwise, those funds will be rolled over into the FY 31, 32 call for projects, potentially based on the new recommendations. And then for FY30, yes, that's currently the only year that's open for all applicants.
But isn't there a 2-year every cycle?
We're doing it for 1 year so that we can eventually become on cadence
Okay.
opposite of Smart Scale.
Okay.
So we won't be doing anything next year, but the year after we'll be doing a FY31 and FY32 call for projects.
So
Correct.
the point that I'm making is basically that there are always usually some monies that are previous to, like, in this case, FY29. Might not be a lot, might be a couple $100,000, but those should be included in the call for projects C, not just FY30.
I would disagree. That was a part of our contention last cycle, was that the call for projects was open for FY 28 and 29, yet several $1 million was available in FY 24, and we did not submit any projects for FY 24 because it was a call for projects for FY 28 and 29. However, the money was still allocated. So unless we come up with a different way of allocating that funding, I don't want to be putting in a study if I don't know that funding is going to be available in
At
that year.
this time, we are not aware of any project that's either closing up or there's going to be a funding swap like the previous rail stations. So right now, the only funds we are aware of is FY30.
Can I ask a question before we just close this to Susan? In terms of the funding scenario adopted by the CTB, did they fund any of our existing projects for the inflationary increase?
Nothing
They
unaffected.
did, and Melissa did, and they also advanced some projects. So
So the ones that,
now we have to worry.
so the ones that they funded means that now some projects are overfunded by an amount.
No,
No.
necessarily, no.
None of Stafford County's projects are overfunded.
So hang on, we had fully funded projects. Are you saying that they did not?
The estimates. 10%, Kathy?
So that, so the estimates have gone up again.
It went up the inflation amount. The state covered the inflation. We had an inflation amount of all projects on all the smart scale projects, all the smart scale projects.
Oh, this is always such a moving target. It drives me completely nuts. Because we had them fully funded like 3 months ago. Now you're telling me, and we added funding to projects to cater for inflation.
But then the inflation amount came in and the state fully funded it.
So at this time, we're not expecting any major additional funding coming along that's outside of the FY30.
What, and here's my recommendation, instead of trying to fund things, because we might have a couple $100,000 here, a couple $100,000 here, I would say you get your projects on the outer years, because you're gonna have more money there. And if you do have an extra, then add it to projects, and then push your money out to those years. So you'll have that, you'll fund in the inner year, 24 through 25, 26 years. You can add that to any of your projects and then drop the money into your 20, 29, 30.
So
That way, when you get your application in, you have more money in those years to apply to those projects that they submitted for.
So there will be a small amount of like the FY 24 funding now that, like the next cycle, that was like the reserve percentage, I think like $100,000 or so, that all of a sudden that will become, but guaranteed, if there's a project that requested additional money, that's.
And so what it simply is put the money in the earlier years and then you drop it off to later years. And then that way, when your applications come in, you have more money to apply to your applications in the outer years.
It sounds to me like this is going to be a smaller call for projects than usual, because this is going to be a 1 year instead of a 2 year. From next cycle, it's going to be always a 2 year, which would mean that it'll be a double thing. So this time there's going to be maybe 6 million,
Under that.
less than 6 million, less than 6 million. And you're telling me that you are not seeing very much leftover money available.
So, last year about this time, we were in a similar situation. There was not supposed to be that much
kind of previous or just kind of funding available before year of kind of the secure plan for basically CMAQ and SVG. Then there ended up being quite a bit of money available. I forget how much exactly, might have been $3 million. I guess my question is, if we restrict ourselves just to allocating FY30 funding, then for some reason something unforeseen happens. Maybe PIP funding becomes available. Maybe the CMAQ and SVG and CR budgets go up unexpectedly. Maybe there's some closeouts that come. I mean, things can happen, things change. Why would we want to restrict ourselves? We could say we can allocate FY30 funds.
So would you be applying for a project in FY24 or FY25?
Probably not, but if they're funding in like 28 or 29, we might apply for them.
Right.
We do have a modification that's been taken into account in the new methodology that says by November, so we do have more time, that if the TAC identifies an area of critical need and that should extra funding become available, y'all can kind of say, okay, put it over in that pot or put it onto that. So there is that mechanism built in.
So that is section 5 there.
Yeah, I'm not going to remember the exact.
It might be a next page.
Yeah, there was an addition. Where was it? Blanking on the exact area. I would almost say, we do a quick search for November. That was within the document. I might have put it up in the call for projects though.
So there is a line in the new methodology which says that the TAC should make a recommendation even during the call for projects period, like now, as to what we should do with additional funds that we don't know about now that come in March next year.
So prior to additional funds,
5.2
are available, the TAC may identify an area of regional critical need in which the TAC recommends where future new funds could be distributed should additional funds become available. This should be done before the close of projects, so we need to kind of know before it's done and occurring in November.
So between now and November, this body, the TAC, should make a recommendation as to what we should do should additional funds become available that are not the annual CMAQ SDGB money that is in the call for projects. So that's the provision that allows you to say, hey, we want to spend it on bike paths, or hey, we want to spend it on studies, or hey, we want to spend it on projects that are
Existing
prior years.
says everything looks like it's getting cost crazy. Let's just go ahead and park that money and pay for what we've already programmed.
So the TAC, you guys can decide what to do with additional money that becomes available. You just need to think about it between now and November and then tell us as staff how to allocate that. remember, we did it last time for you and we don't like that. We would rather that you make a recommendation together. So please, that is a mechanism for you to do exactly that. So Paul could say, hey, we think we should put it on projects between 24 and 29, or we should put it on studies, or we should put it on bike paths, or we should put it on highway improvements, or whatever. You all can discuss that.
And basically, you'll have 3 TAC meetings if you count the September when we open call for projects to discuss that. So there could be actually 3 months of discussion. Just has to be done before the end of the call for projects. So we don't want to end call for projects and then try to put that.
And then you would be able to, during the call for projects, ideas of what that should be spent on, which could be projects as well, right?
So with regards to November, we may know more information by November, but likely we won't know that much. I'll say a lot of times it's at some point during the winter. I'll say if there are additional kind of funds that become available, that's when we know. That could kind of have a strong influence on what the TAC would decide. So I guess my question just with the new funding is why would we want to restrict ourselves to basically only being able to make a decision by November?
You just need to tell us or say what is the area where if new funds become available, that is, because as soon as November we start scoring, particularly with the increased shortened time for it to start doing proposed allocations, I can't just be kind of holding off where should I move funds because that's going to start making a very big difference on the number. So it's kind of a say, identify what you need. If should new funds become available, you have a lot of flexibility there, and then we can go from there rather than, because at the end of November, eventually the whole TAC will know what all jurisdictions projects are going to basically be. That kind of prevents saying, okay, let's fund this and that.
So I guess with the new funding, why would we not kind of use the investing methodology we use for the FY30 and any other new funding?
So part of the problem here is that let's say you decide, for argument's sake, right? I know we've spent a lot on studies, so you might not want to spend any more money on studies, but let's, for argument's sake, create a hypothetical. Counties want studies, and so you decide at the TAC level that you want to spend the money on studies. The call for projects is going to close in November, and so if you want to spend it on studies, you need to be able to submit as counties or whoever your projects for that particular category that you've decided we're going to spend the extra money on. So if you close the call for projects and then decide after that, oh, we want to spend the money on studies, we've already closed the call for projects, if you know what I mean. In other words, you kind of, if you want to go that route, kind of need to have an additional reserve project for whatever extra funding might become available, because we've got to score those projects. If you don't want to spend it on projects that are new, then of course it doesn't matter. You can just allocate it to existing projects in the system. But if you want to spend it on a new project or a study or a bike path, you need to have that study or bike path or project scored.
And if you don't want to do this, we still default to the standard methodology for distribution. So
Can't introduce new projects for scoring after the call for projects is closed. That's why it says up until November.
So I guess what I had thought we had discussed was that basically any money that's available would go to basically the existing project requests first. Then whatever was left over, including all the FY30 or whatever years are allocated to new projects, that would be allocated using the modal basically amounts for CMAC and STBG that we had kind of discussed. Like, are we talking about deviating from that?
John, do you want to review what the existing project criteria is and how we're going about that?
So for funding shortfalls, correct? That's what you're asking. Existing projects for funding shortfalls. We're doing the up to 10% of the category, so CMAC, carbon reduction, or STBG as indexed on the years moving forward. So if the amount increases a little bit, that 10% kind of moves with it. So you can request up to that amount. That request gets applied prior to any distributions of the news kind kind of this modal split. Those projects come first, then you have the modal splits based on the new funding coming available. As far as kind of where this will come in is that should new funding come available, let's just say the carbon reduction program, it has its own limits, so it can't just be applied wherever, but for a new carbon reduction program, and y'all say, you know what, let's just say, people want to, I don't think of a good project, and now I'm not just blanking because I just lost myself saying, yeah, the county said, we all look and say, we definitely need, you know, a certain type of bike ped infrastructure. That program's coming in, it's an eligible project, and therefore we can direct that 200,000 to that.
So can I just ask a fundamental question, because that will hopefully shorten this discussion. For new funding and that paragraph there, do you want that to apply to only existing projects that have already come in and been scored, including the new ones that you're going to submit before November? Or do you anticipate wanting to submit an additional project for potential new money? That's the fundamental question. Because Paul's right, if we just apply it to projects that have already been scored, then there's no problem. We're just going to follow the methodology, which puts all those caps in place, which prevents us shifting money around because it's all very particularly categorized, done. However, if you want the ability to put in an additional project just for money that falls from the sky, then this particular window allows you to do that, and then you don't have, you here in this room don't have to then follow all those splits if it's going to be a new project. But that's your decision, which you must decide before November. If you wanted to apply to only existing and new scored projects that are already scored, then you need to add a quick sentence after the word November to say all funds will only be used for projects that are already scored and have already been submitted in up to this round of submissions, because then we don't need to bother about asking for guidance from the TAC every November, because there's no need for it. You've already scored all your projects, you put them in the pot, and we take the new funding and we just apply the old methodology, but not the old, the funding splits and the caps and all those other things to that new money. So those are the two philosophical ways you can approach this. You either say, allow yourselves the freedom to choose to put in a new project if there's additional money, or you say, no, the money all gets spent on old projects or new projects that are scored in this round, and that's it.
So I would favor the latter.
So there will not be no new projects. So you either, if new money comes, you then apply it to old projects or submitted projects, the submitted projects in this round. Right?
Yeah.
Yes.
Is that agreement across the TAC?
Anyone?
Anybody see
Any
that
issues
differently?
with that?
So then I'm going to add in one sentence after November, which says all funds will be applied to existing projects or projects scored in this round. Are you happy with that?
So will that mean that our call for projects is for not just FY30?
It's for FY30 plus any new funding that becomes available.
So how will I know at the time of the call for projects to apply for that new funding?
You won't.
Exactly.
But
So I could be wasting an application slot if I'm not sure if new funding is becoming available.
that's true. But the point
That's the issue with it.
So that's why, that's the weakness.
Exactly.
Each option has a strength and a weakness, right? So Paul's saying, and well, many of you are saying, existing projects only. We can't go and get a whole new bunch of projects to score in March when you know how much money is available. There's no time for that. We then have to just park the money for next round, which in this case is going to be 2 years.
One pause. There's always, this is kind of, it's not a true backdoor option. So you're worried about wasting a slot for a project that you need funding now. Let's just say that. There is a mechanism within the methodology, and we did this particularly with Paul's 126 project. if you go through the methodology and become a top scoring project that gets funded, you can then ask us to prioritize that project, particularly if you have funding for an existing project, or if there's another jurisdiction that's like, we're nowhere close, feel free to swap the funds. We can always accelerate that project, but that just means another project in queue will be delayed. So you can always do that swap. So there is always that. If you have the existing or a new project that you have a more recent need, feel it's a strong project that will get funding, we can always accelerate it with a funding, move the money in between. But note that there is going to be certain limitations. It might not score well enough to be funded, so that could be that, as well as depending on if there's any other weird funding shortfall, there might be challenges to that. And accelerating a project always loses money because there's always less money closer in more recent years than the further.
So the answer to Matthew's problem is a simple one also. It's very simple. It's not complicated. You cannot delay deciding what to spend money on in the new funding in the hope that you can add another project later because we can't score that project in March, right? So the only option you have then is to park the money for another round, to park it in the balanced entry. That's all you can do. You can't hold open the decision on whether to have a new project or not beyond November, because we can't score it. There's not a way around that. It's a timeline thing. We have to do all the scoring, bring it to you, then listen to all your objections and concerns, fix errors, check. It's a long process. So you will never know in November if there's that additional money available. You will never know. There's never going to be a
flaw in the criteria.
It's not a flaw in the criteria, it's a flaw in the real world, right? The
Well,
real
no,
world works like that, and we can't know before we know.
So Matt, you basically, as John was saying, there is flexibility basically to move funding back and forth between years, but if staff that has an earlier project and scores highly, I mean, you could still get money for that. So I guess I just want to address that. It's not that if you have an FY25 need, you can't get any funding at all.
Right.
Now, say if you want $5 million in FY25, that's probably not going to happen given that. Doesn't mean that there might not be 500,000 still.
Right.
In FY25.
Right. So we could submit a project, even if it scores low, we could move funding around, but
Yeah,
yeah, it's still a flaw in the criteria.
it's not a flaw in the criteria. There's no way in the physical universe that I can accommodate your need. I can't tell you how much money is going to be available before it's available. And Susan cannot tell me how much it is. And because she can't do that, I can't tell you how much you're going to have for this category. And so what you have to do is have a category that says, we are going to either park the funds until we know how much it is, and you then can't get the money this round. It's going to be parked until a future round, which is 2 years down the line. That's the only way you can
And we'll only
do that.
1 year out of the 2 years.
That you cannot find out about money in March and then create new projects which have to be scored by April. You can't. That's the one thing you can't do, and it's not a flaw in the methodology that you can't do that. It's a flaw in when VDOT tells us how much money.
That's even true in MPOs in other states.
It's all right, Vida.
It's true everywhere. It's the real world that won't accommodate the option that you would like. We last round did it, but it created huge unhappiness. So we're not doing it again because we've taken that option off the table. The TAC has to decide what to do with extra money that comes in. But I'm suggesting that what you should do, in my opinion, not even the FAMPO staff's opinion, my unique opinion, is that what you should do is to spend that money on projects that you have already submitted or projects that you've submitted this round and got scored, and that you allocate it. And the reason I say that is because it's often money that expires. When we get new money, it's always, here's money for FY25, 26, 27, 28, 20, like they did with congestion money. And we had to allocate it quickly because the FY24 money was going to expire. You can't keep it warm for a long time. You can park FY30 money, but you can't park FY24 money. It's too soon. That's just my opinion. You don't have to disagree, do it another way. I don't care really. We just added that new funding option for the TAC. Because first of all, we don't want to make the decision because we don't want to deal with the flack when you don't agree with us. So we want you to make the decision. And secondly, it gives us the out that we can decide before November what to do with any hypothetical money that might or might not come in that Congress may decide to allocate or the federal DOT. So it gives you an extra option, which we didn't have before. Now we've written it into the methodology, and it stops FAMPO staff from making any allocations without your decision.
Oh, do you want to state your motion? Do your motion?
So,
You can delay, sorry, one last thing. You can delay the word November. You can move it to March on condition that you don't introduce new projects in March. Do you get what I'm saying? So you can delay that decision until you know how much money it is. That you can do, provided you get rid of the option for new projects in March, because it'll be too late to get new projects in March.
Ian, can you please just restate like the one sentence you said, like to add Bestie on that?
So
That's what we're gonna change, yeah.
I'm gonna capture it.
read it, Becky.
All funds will be applied to existing projects or projects scored in this round.
I make a motion that we amend basically, section 5.2 to basically include that language that Becky just.
And are you changing the date from November to March or leaving it as is?
So, well, what's your thought on that?
I mean, I think it would help Matthew and his concern if you moved that November to March.
Yeah.
Because then if
Fine.
Susan has given us the indication of,
November, I think is fine, basically for us with that sentence change.
And March would give you the time
March is fine.
to make a decision.
Yeah.
I mean, for me, it doesn't, for me, if you're not adding any projects, it's
Yeah.
just for you moving money around. So for me, it doesn't, it's tomato, tomato.
It doesn't matter either way.
So it's your motion.
So Paul, is this a call to open the call for projects or just to amend the criteria?
Well.
amend that paragraph.
Amend that paragraph under 5.2.
Okay. All right, do you want to restate the motion just clearly?
So I'm making a motion to amend basically section 5.2, new funding, to add the sentence that Becky read, just at the end of that first paragraph.
All right, there's a motion on the table, there's a second?
Second.
All right, any discussion? All right, all those in favor say aye.
Aye. Aye.
Any opposed? All right, motion carries.
Done.
All right, so we're now moving on. Do we want to do a call for projects?
Yeah,
Or do we-
I just had a couple questions on just the form. If you bring that up, the application form.
Just go to the website and click on the application form.
Yes, we have a online form that's now available, as well as an updated Word file that's going to be going around. I am going to work with each one of the entities and jurisdictions here. I'm going to set up so you'll have a drop folder that you can either, if you choose to email me, feel free to do so, but you'll also have access to a OneDrive file that only your jurisdiction will be able to see. So if you want to just upload projects and work from there, you can do that as well. I'll reach out to each one of the applicable jurisdictions and include that. So
Click on that.
should be now open to everybody.
So I was actually looking at the Word form that looked a little different than that.
Okay, just go to the agenda, go to the TAC agenda.
Yeah,
All right, that one is fine.
should be on the site. So.
There you go, there's the form.
So a couple comments, so with the applying for under kind of the, near the top, shouldn't CR kind of be a box? Maybe it should be CMAX /
CMAX, yeah, we can make a change there.
And then I guess on the second page, this was under section 4, project finance. I guess it's just like a question, like it lists 3 years there, like, would we create some more flexibility on the years where we're not going to pigeonhole just to those 3? This goes back to like Matthew's point.
I would quietly say right now for this application, because I agree, because this is the, if you need funding, we gotta move it around. My thing is, we're still issuing FY30 funds. This is what it's for. Put it there. If you do have a need, then you need to work with us when the project allocations are going to happen to accelerate that project. I'm nervous because we're not saying 25 funding.
Foley, please don't remove the form, just leave it there for now. So just listening to Paul, I think that that is logical to remove those words FY28, FY29, because we may need to move those years around.
Well, no, we do have FY28 funds and FY29 funds available for this project year with.
So should it not just,
Suggestion, just leave it blank. We do ours as in, we go Y1, which is first year in our process, to up to 6. So instead of putting your dates, 8, 9, or 30, put in 4, 5, and 6. Because that's how we get the money. There's 6 years, you're gonna get in the 6-year plan, and the money would be coming in the last 3 years, which is year 4, year 5, and year 6. You never have to change it.
so I guess question, what is the rationale for doing a specific year rather than just saying as soon as possible? If I have to put in money, are you gonna hold me to that money that I put in there?
Well, my thing is when I start doing the allocations, since we're doing primarily FY30, that tells me how much funding is available and available for a swap at that point in time. And therefore, then you make the request to can you accelerate this project so that if there's any project that's earlier that you're delaying, it's going to go into FY30. Like that, it's kind of like, please move my FY30 allocation funds for this and do a swap. I don't want to get in the idea that if we're going to say there's $6 million available and say, but we're putting all the years on, like that become.
Can I suggest that we do what Susan just suggested?
So we 4, 5, and 6.
Yeah, it's always gonna be that way. It is always that way, because it's only 6 years of your 6-year plan, and they do it year 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, and you'll never have to change it again.
That's gonna
The
be.
only thing sometimes I have to go back and look at how projects were requested based on the fiscal year and when the applications were for existing projects. There's some mechanisms that I need to
So
document.
What's the issue with just doing a total amount and just as soon as possible? Because like for the TMA, for instance, I don't know how much money is available. I have a general idea, but I'm usually a little bit off from what you guys have. So are you gonna hold me to
That's
those
your
numbers?
cost overruns, the
No.
percent and everything starts
No,
on that figure that you request.
no, I'm just talking about in general. If I put $200,000 in FY28, if there's $250,000 available, are you gonna hold me to that?
Well, if you're
It's
The answer is yes, but no.
right.
Okay, my thing was,
Okay, you all are making this a complete long drawn out drama. The only reason I can think of right now sitting here to have those 3 things is because the methodology says that you're only going to get one amount for PE, for right of way, and for construction. But I'm saying that I agree with Susan, take off those dates and put on the different years, because you're going to find that when we sit down as a staff and have to allocate funding, we might have to fiddle the years to make it work. So give us a tiny bit of wiggle room to shift money a little bit around. If you make it concrete like that, it's going to be a little hard to sometimes accommodate.
What's the issue with just saying a total amount rather than making it?
Well, then
year
you have to
4,
change
5,
your
6?
methodology to not restrict you to only claim once for each phase of the project. You have to take that out.
There's nothing to do with phases here. This is just total cost of the
PE
project.
is a
okay, because here's what applications we've had issues with. We're getting folks in their applications telling us what the total cost of the project. That's great, but I need to know how much.
Right.
I say. I need both of those amounts.
But I'm just talking about the amounts.
So he's saying leave the total project cost and the total requested funds. That's
You
fine.
can do PE
He's
right
not
away.
arguing with
That's
that.
fine.
He's arguing with why you need the 3 phases.
No. I'm arguing with the years.
Okay. Well,
Why do we need the 3 years? Why not just say total requested funds as soon as possible
and total project cost.
and total project cost? You can still have PE right away in
We're saying
construction.
the same thing.
So you're gonna remove FY 28, 29, and 30 then?
Just because we had 3 years of funding available for this cycle, or
Yeah.
for this call for projects, because it's unique and because we have a weird uniqueness happening this year. So
Yeah, so in future rounds, it'll
it
be,
would drop off.
it would drop off,
Or it
so
would
I
be
don't
unique.
see why it's an issue. Yeah, I don't see.
I'm just trying to be.
All right, so problem solved.
It's not solved. John and Matthew are.
I still don't
Totally
understand
disagree.
what's the issue with just putting a total.
Then we agree with Matt.
Oh,
So, just a suggestion, so basically the applicant puts in the project schedule.
Yep.
What if basically with that process, basically just the applicant would basically put in the requested amount of money, basically based on that schedule for the various phases.
Or our schedule will change depending on how we get funding.
Right, but, I mean, just the desire.
Right, but John's
Uh,
trying to
You
hold,
know exactly how much money, we do know how much money is available in FY 28.
so you'll tell me that before,
On
and
our,
with FY 30, you'll tell me how much money, no, but for FY 30,
Yeah.
you'll tell me how much money is available for the TMA before I submit this application.
we won't know how much that is until,
Once the,
but
Mr. Chair.
Yeah.
Once the project is funded, then FAMPO staff would do your magic in allocating the funds. So that, I think that's what Matt is saying. If you have a total number, $1 million, and there's a couple of projects, what Ian was saying is y'all figure out what that dollar value is gonna be. If you leave that blank, you still know whose projects is prioritized first, and you still have the amount and let it roll. So I don't think you need that. I think a total number is fine because you'll have your project schedule and y'all will just let it flow.
cost benefit scoring, it says how much you're requesting.
You'll still have,
Just on,
Okay, so nobody in this room is saying that we should not have the total project cost and the total requested funds, yes?
Correct.
So can we stop talking about that completely and forget that item, because you're all raising it again and again and no one's fighting back with you. That's fine, we will have both of those amounts. The only discussion is whether we should have those three separate ones for FY 28, 29, and 30, that's the discussion. So forget all about the total, forget that discussion.
29, if you are not Stafford County, you should not even be looking at these two columns. And for FY 30, you're coming back into, but what if I underfund my TMA stuff?
exactly.
Exactly. You either need to make sure that your projects are over what you're expecting there, or expect that if you come under, that money's going to be rolled into the general pot.
Exactly. So
So,
why not just do a total project cost? So we don't have to worry about either of those factors.
make sure that this number would probably exceed.
What's the issue with just doing a total instead of doing a specific year?
Well, that's eventually going to fall. Like, that's eventually going to fall off, and I might have 2 years come there. So,
We can talk offline.
I'm not allowed to move motions. Can you please all elect me to an option where I can't vote, but I can at least move a motion, because geez.
Well, I had one other minor comment, just on basically the program funding, basically on the bottom of page 2. I thought it would be helpful to include basically a locality CIP and in the list of options, just to check.
That works. Everybody's supportive of that? Any discussion?
Did you get that? Paul's asking that we add the CIP as a document that can be an option on that line item.
I mean, you can just listen to other, like, I mean, I guess.
In the locality CIP, that's a pretty major kind of item that localities use. So. Again, it just was a thought.
I will make a motion to add in a box for locality CIP. Oh, I can't make motions.
Yes, you
Sorry.
can.
Yes, you can.
Okay.
Second.
All right. Any discussion? Favor say aye.
I'm
Opposed? All right, motion carries.
Please scroll back up again, because you didn't make a decision and I'm going to be sitting carrying the baby after today. Can you please vote on whether you want to keep FY 28, 29, and 30 or just delete them? Because I need to know that. Or alternatively, go with Susan's proposal of just making it year 4, 5, and 6.
So I make a motion that we delete them.
Do you have a second? I will second. Any discussion?
I'm just gonna abstain just because it doesn't apply to us. so.
Yeah, same here.
It's just Stafford.
Yeah, just Stafford.
Yep. All right. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed or abstentions? Abstention. All right, motion carries.
Done. Okay, move on. Don't have a baby to worry about.
So I want to make a motion that we basically initiate the call projects.
I have one more request for a change. In the packet, it says that alternative fuel is listed under roadways for, I think, STG. It should be listed as a transit category. So that header will change.
Wait, so is that the STPG and the CMAC?
No, like, one of them has it correct, the other one doesn't. I think it's, SCBG has that error, and I just wanted to make sure that that is clear, that it would be section 4, about halfway through.
It's an obvious error.
I just want to be very clear that,
Can you just show us that?
yeah, through scroll down a little. Yep, so STBG, alternative fuel, this should be scratched out roadway, scratch out alternative fuels would go into the transit section.
So just, it's a motion to delete and roadway alternative fuel on the STGB methodology at 4.1.
Make the motion as stated.
Do you have a second?
Second.
All right, any discussion? All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed?
Go on.
Motion carries. All right, so Paul, are you motioning, you moved for a call for projects? Were you also motioning for the approve the project selection process or just the call
No,
for
I
project?
wanted to talk about that. So I guess if we wanted to, like,
So do the call for
Yeah,
projects
do the
then
call for
first.
projects.
that was a separate item. Yeah, I want to make a motion to call projects as Tuesday, today, and deadline is November 4th.
All right,
Okay.
do you have a second?
Okay.
Second.
All right, any discussion?
Although,
All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Motion carries.
Thank you. Next item.
All right, Paul, you wanted to talk about the project selection process?
Yeah, I guess, so we had some comments on the CMAC. Yes, yeah, I think might have been more on the STBG because I think we hadn't really talked about that.
So the STBG should be, John, correct me if I'm wrong, but STBG should be exact copy of CMAC minus air quality. Like it's,
minus air quality with
And
a
stuff.
few things to rework, like,
okay.
just to make it compliant.
Paul, your question was related to STBG under which section?
So we have a comments.
So Paul, did you forward these comments beforehand
Yes,
to TAC?
I did the staff.
Um,
Yeah, there was that call basically that the staff give us your comments by such and such day. We sent comments.
Okay.
Stafford submit comments?
we didn't have any
Did
further.
he submit comments?
No, but staff should be giving you, as a chair, a copy of the comments.
Can we pull Paul's comments up on the screen possibly?
Did you?
They're not attached to the agenda because the agenda had gone out. So it's on an email. So
They were sent on August 20th, by the way.
John has got it on email and
CC include you on, like, I provide a list and the track changes when you requested everything to.
If it's in there, then yes.
So, that should be a part of it, but I'll check.
We can just start going through the comments then in some time.
so the smaller ones John has done, the larger ones are policy issues, which staff can't do, just the staff. We need those sorts of comments to go to the TAC. Or
So Mr. Chair, will Paul review them and then we will make decisions on them at the next meetings?
no.
Do it today.
We need to get it done.
Okay,
Can we please just pull up Paul's email?
that's what I'm trying to find.
I can't, so if somebody can email the conference room.
You included me, did you not, Paul? I think you included me, Paul, when you sent that to us.
I believe I did.
Thank you, Becky.
Very
Mr. Chair, in the interest of time, can we go into D? while-
Yes, let's do that.
Where is Connor?
Oh, tricked us.
We go into E.
There we go. So there's the map. We are very excited by this map. It's the land use map that we made using the county's comprehensive plans and the city's plans and the zoning that are current. But what we did with the zonings is to merge them into similar categories because each jurisdiction has a different way of dealing with its zoning. So what is agricultural is not quite the same definition across the jurisdictions. So we've merged categories to make them fit. And so that the greens and the yellows and the oranges, those are all the zonings of each of the 5 jurisdictions. And then what we've got is a congestion map in the pinks and reds on the roadways to show you where the congestion is. And we've done a volume to capacity ratio. So what you then get is the height in 3D of those roadway segments in red shows you the size of the problem, if I can put it like that, based on the volume to capacity ratio. So the darker the purple, the worse the volume to capacity ratio is. And John, if I'm correct, the height of the line indicates the total volume.
This is VC, so the height of the volume.
Yeah, so the volume capacity ratio is shown there by height and the darkness of the color. So Coley, if you can just smooth that map slightly north. There you go. So if you see that as a group, you will see immediately that the worst volume to capacity ratio in the region is US 17 Warrenton Road. That's the worst congestion we currently have. And also the map's useful if you click on segments of roadway, it will give you all the data about that volume to capacity ratio, right? So you can see at a glance what exactly the problem is. So the worst in the region is that section of Warrenton Road. The second worst is Garrisonville Road, which is further north again. Just scroll further north. There you can see at the top there, Garrisonville Road, you can see those dark purples and the height there. So Garrisonville Road there. And the third one is Route 3, which you can see down in the middle there. So there, where Coley's cursor is now, that is Route 3. And there you can see that particular ratio. We think the map is quite useful for people to use to show as a visual, and you can zoom in on any property really in the region, any street, and see immediately what's going on in terms of the density, in terms of the land use, and in terms of the volume to capacity ratio, which shows you where the congestion is worse.
Will this be posted online on the TAC website?
So we're making this available to
Awesome.
all the TAC folks that are here, and we will likely put it on the website. We're just going through some technical discussions.
Unless there's any discussion points on this, we can move back to item C, CMAQ SUV project selection process.
Feel free to use the map to show people. It helps to explain sometimes how bad the travel is.
I'll just make a quick comment. I mean, it's kind of striking to see it like this because those facilities are already monstrously wide. So I think this helps to make the case that you're not going to add another couple of lanes to Garrisonville Road or, Route 17 without major property impacts. So, helps to strengthen some of the findings from the east-west study.
Yeah.
I'd like to make one comment too. I think it's great to have land use coordinated on it as well.
Yeah.
We get a lot of feedback on higher density land use. That very clearly shows
Exactly.
it's the case.
Yeah.
Okay, so the chair.
Just pulling up the email and the notes. All right, awesome. All right,
There is
Paul, the
there's
floor is yours, but in the
there's the
interest of
comment.
time, we shall make this as quick as possible.
So some of the small ones have already been taken care of in the draft that you've got.
The time, and I also said we weren't planning to go through our minor comments, we're only going through major ones. So basically with section 2.3 on SWG, and maybe this is basically, it seems like it's written where FAMPO staff can propose a modified call for projects without the TAC.
Which number are you on, Paul?
Number 1 under SWG, major.
Probably.
So it's not a typo, and the reason for that was, you remember our discussion when I called a couple of you to say we've got a problem with the with December because we don't have the full 10 weeks because we're starting late because of the public holiday and all that. So the intention here is to say that, remember, actually requires the policy committee to initiate a call for projects. Even the TAC doesn't on their own initiate a call for projects. But we didn't want to have to recall the whole TAC to have the modified call for projects. Remember, we only do a call for projects once a year. We just wanted to move it up 2 weeks, but we couldn't do it in terms of the current methodology without recalling the whole TAC. But I mean, remove it if you wanted. It just, each one of these things is meant today, including the changing of the SEEP and all that, is trying to speed up the process. It's not trying to usurp anyone's authority. It's trying to get the process to function quicker. Remember that the staff, if staff were to propose a modified call for projects, staff can't start the call for projects. It has to be done by the policy committee.
Say our concern was just that it should go through the TAC, and I'll say if the TAC were to ever need a special meeting for this,
And that's fine. What we have done is in item 8E, we proposed that we change that particular item in the TAC bylaws to allow an online meeting. So that because we're just worried about forcing you all to drive to this office. That's really, so you can remove that, but hopefully you will then approve the bylaw amendment, which allows us to have an online meeting.
So does anyone have any issues with both of those proposals that are on the board? Okay.
Question about the map. That's too late. Can we go back to that map?
That's up to the
Let's finish this first and then we'll go back to it then. So that one's good. Are we removing that?
okay, yeah, so number 2, basically studies this the primary project types under SWG.
That's been amended. Item number 3.
3 goes down to section 3.2. This is with the eligible applicants.
No, Kylie, please don't move that. Just leave it where it is. Thank you.
Basically, it was removed reference to section 3.1. And that clearly spell out the localities and agencies that are eligible for each project category, similar to what was done for Stafford with active transportation. Existing language is unclear. As previously discussed at several subcommittee and TAC meetings, we did not support university staff being an applicant receiving applications for any project category under either STBG or CMAQ CLO.
So disregarding the university staff item, I don't have any issue with adding who is specifically eligible under that section.
John, my understanding is that there are 2 different categories of this concept of eligible. And both are in the methodology. The one is eligible applicants in terms of federal law, right? And it just states there blanket, these would be eligible applicants. Then there's another section which identifies what FAMPO considers to be people who can, I'm changing the language on purpose, people who can submit applications.
So within both the CMAQ and STBG methodologies in this round, as a whole, have not made any changes to any applicable entity or jurisdiction for any of these processes that were not eligible in the previous round. We have not touched who can apply for project. There's been no update to that. There's been no change to increase anybody. So we have not made any changes on that front. I don't want to keep switching between the two. My one thing is that I'm always a little bit nervous to overly state specifically which jurisdiction or entity can be named, because as soon as you name it, it's limited, but theory, any like federally eligible, like transit provider could be an eligible applicant. Then specifically listing the name. So you do have kind of that little.
But we do have a separate section which indicates who we will receive applications from,
Yes.
which is a smaller group than who is federally
They are,
applicable.
and that is listed. So it's our jurisdictions. It says jurisdictions.
You pull it up.
Yeah, let's pull that to section.
Section 3.2.2.
So it has eligible, scroll that box right there. Input jurisdiction. So if we name it and let's just say another jurisdiction comes along, they are automatically eligible rather than just naming the jurisdictions.
So those are the ones there, and I don't see GWRC there.
So it's listed under section 3.1. Kind of like on.
That's because that's the discussion of the federal eligible category.
Right, but then under 3.2.2, it talks about basically other eligible agencies will receive 3 STBG applications, regardless of mode if they're eligible applicant based on section 3. Referencing back to section 3, not the table right there.
Well, that's still in.
Well, and then why don't we just change that 3.1 to 3.2, and then that's the end of the problem. That's the end of the problem, right?
That can work.
So yeah, just make that 3.1, 3.2, Mr. Chair. Can we approve that?
Yeah. Do we want a motion for all of this? Or?
We'll just ask, is anybody
Yeah.
objecting to that? Can we change that 3.1 to 3.2?
And to move this along a little bit quicker, does anyone support removing GWC staff as being applicant receiving applications?
You don't need to now because
Alright.
you've taken 3.1 out and made it 3.2.
For this.
So there's no need to.
All right, moving on to number.
Next one.
Yeah, so this was kind of a semantic issue. This was again on section 3.2. You just, each BAMPO staff and submit to, BAMPO staff may only submit.
Ian or John, do not have any issues with that?
It's the same language.
Yeah.
That's a
All right,
non-issue.
moving on to number 5.
And I think number 5, I think John said. that
Perfect.
he's-
John is just
All right,
fixed.
moving on to number
Six.
6.
Okay, so this concerns studies. This is section 4.4. I don't know if you want to go to that.
Actually, I can, so, you're requesting like the UPWP. The reason why that is, it's an annually updated document. And this is, and it lists 10 priorities areas with, whether or not the project is listed in the LRTP. It's a multimodal, multimodal forward planning, the TMA, congestion management, ITS, freight planning, environmental justice, public participation focus, or performance-based planning. And so in this case, in this scenario, is depending on how many areas a submitted study is proposing, it will get a point for checking each one of those boxes. So let's just say if it's only an ITS oriented study, it might only hit the ITS, maybe if it's on the LRTP corridor, so it might hit a point there. But if it's not focused on, it might get a point for congestion management. It depends on what the study is outlining. Of course, if it's not performance-based planning, if it's not addressing environmental justice issues, it doesn't get a point. So this is just a scoring methodology. It's based on the 10 planning priorities for BAMPO through the region for studies submitted to us. So that's the justification, because it's up to their year. As that document's updated or those priorities change, yearly it's updated so we can move forward with that. So
the question with that is basically the UPWP, that's a near-term document. Basically, that'll be like, FY 20. Funding available for studies is likely all out in the future, like an FY 30. So it's possible there could be something that change that basically is not
in the UPWP, and the UPWP is not likely mentioning those studies specifically, so it just didn't make sense to us, given that we don't have near-term study funding.
It's looking at, so the UPWP identifies the current FAMPO planning priorities. And those 10 listed were the current planning priorities. And we're basically offering a scoring mechanism based on what our currently adopted planning priorities are. We're using the UPWP to outline. It's those 10.
So I think what we had suggested in the comment was maybe to link it to something in the CORP or the LRTP instead of the UPWP.
I think the criteria that's there is fine. It hasn't been an issue. Unless anyone else disagrees with me.
This was already in
Yeah,
the subcommittee, right?
we discussed it a little bit, yes.
Well, I think on the STBG, I don't think we need to discuss that. This is the first time. All right,
It's
so
semantics at this point.
Move on to number 7. So this is section 5.1, allocation process, item E. Want to give
Instead of reading through all the things, Paul, maybe just point out the flaws that are concern, or we can.
Section 5.1.
Carly, will you just go to the other document, bring section 5.1?
Isn't that just a statement he's saying? I don't.
Go back to 5.1, please.
Question item?
5.1.
We're on question number 7 on STBG.
This was getting back to the
There.
maximum cap for project increases.
Yeah,
I mean, we already cited this,
Side of this.
referencing a discussion in the meeting where it was capped at $250,000, and then it was later revised to basically 10% of that year, which comes out pretty close to $4 but it's indexed based on how funding changes rather than making it a set amount. So
And we decided that at the last subcommittee meeting.
Scroll down a little bit further, Coley, to where it speaks about the 10% and the 100. John, where is it in the methodology?
it keeps going down. I think it's we're having a. Yeah.
If everybody is okay with what's currently in the methodology, other than the comment here, we can move on.
So there was an issue, like I'm looking at number 8. Basically, there was an issue with the years, like kind of the years are mentioned like 2 through 5. We talked about kind of including all the years. That's basically the same section we were just talking about under kind of 5.1, section 8.
There's 5.1 on the screen. Just point it out to us. Just scroll down, I
It's
think. There.
in the very first paragraph under number 8.
Under 5, I think it's in.
Under 5.1 there.
Scroll up one more. It's actually 2 5.1s. It's glitching, yeah.
Yeah, that's it. See between years 2 to 5. That's what comment 8 is referring to.
Okay, so which clause in that 8 is the one you wanted to change?
It's the second sentence. It's in the middle of that.
These percentage budgets will generally be for the out year of the SIP, but should funding be available in a mid-year, that amount of funding will be accounted for in the developing the percentage of breakdown by mode.
So the issue is it should apply to kind of the funding for all the years, not just year 6, not just years 2 to 6, previous through 6. This is something we've discussed before, and I thought we agreed to. So this could be an old reference that just wasn't updated.
Anyone have any issue with that?
Can you redirect what we're looking at specifically, which line?
The second sentence
Okay.
under number 8.
Okay.
It's basically that kind of that in parentheses between years 2 and 5.
So you want it to be from,
It should apply to all the years. Like that sentence says, generally the out year, which is year 6, maybe between the mid years, kind of 2 to 5, but it doesn't include year 1 or the previous funding that's available.
Year 1 is basically what's like now. So.
And there's not much funding to,
5.
yeah, there's not much money to allocate out in year 1. There's $50,000 and $75,000.
I'm not
So
sure that really there's a big issue with Paul's proposal. We just make it for all years because, I mean, it's basically the same. You're applying the percentage for the outer years, then you're applying it for 2 to
Thing to allocate in year 1, I have to.
CBG has $50,000 or so. 10% of that for studies is what, 10,000?
It's like nothing.
5,000? Like it's nothing.
So this is not studies, this is all of STBG.
Right, but do we allocate
But
$5,000?
We only have left over in year 1 the 50,000 or the 75,000 that is kept in the emergency.
But it's possible to swap funding between the years so that
Mhm.
5,000 could go to some other year and then
Right.
you have an additional 5,000.
And we can make that decision at that point. I mean, that's what we talked about earlier in the TAC bylaws that goes to the projects.
I mean, it's not going to kill anybody to make it 1 to 5. I'm happy either way.
I'm saying make it previous through year 6. It should go all on.
Not previous, not before
Well-
year 1. No,
Why not?
I mean, right now, we are in FY, like, we are in year 1 of what we just approved.
So I'm not saying change things that are already allocated. If new previous funding becomes available, which can happen.
yeah, I'm just thinking if it's a project that should have already started, I don't think you should be able to go back because VDOT is gonna say you should have finished your project. So I don't think.
Paul's talking about leftover and remainder funds if a project is closed out and suddenly there's money available.
Right, I just don't think it should go back to,
Well-
that should have started.
Because I can't necessarily, I can't just go ahead and put it on stuff that's like right now. I have to put it in year 2 through 5. I have to come back. If that's new funding, I have to put it and make it available by that. I can't, if in your case, new funding comes available, like the train project, I can't necessarily put it into the current year. And year 1 is the current year, so.
So I guess I just want to highlight, basically last year when there was, I think, like a $1.8 million and CR funding that became available, that kind of translated to this previous year funding that went in debt.
Mhm.
That would be outside of years 2 to 6. But that was previous. It wasn't even year 1.
A lot of it's semantics at this point. The TAC can make the decisions at the time. We have the right to, if something comes up like that, we have the right to discuss it and change it and decide how we want to go about it. All right, we're adding in all these rules and bylaws, but it's going to hurt us in the end at some point.
But we agreed basically, and this is actually coming from Stafford last time, basically with the modal splits, they should be applied to all of the SWG funding.
And we discussed it at the time, and that was how we went about it with what Ian proposed. Sure, it wasn't perfect, wasn't perfectly happy with it, but we discussed it and we went about it with funding studies.
What does anybody else think? It's going to affect only year 1 and previous years, which is leftover money that becomes available because the project closes out and they use less than their available funds. So we don't know what the amount of funding would be. It depends from year to year. Some years it'll be $50. Another year it will be $500,000 or $1 million. It all depends on what projects close out and how much money is left over.
So it sounds like we have an agreement on year 1.
including that. What do people feel about with the previous?
Don't have an opinion. It doesn't matter either way.
Can I just ask VDOT really quick, is that gonna cause an issue with of your programming? That's what I'm worried about. 'Cause we would have to change funding for previous year on previous projects.
Yeah, this is not impacting any funding on previous year projects. This is basically if you have basically a closeout.
Yeah, you close out.
So $1 million comes available that's not allocated in any project in its previous funding.
Oh, the funding is previous. You're not moving it to an old project that was supposed to be done in 2021.
No, it would be like if a project closes out, like if we get $1 million this round, we could therefore go ahead and program it in FY '25.
Oh, yeah, no, okay.
But I would also point out is if we ever have to move money, or you're saying we need to split it up by mode for that, but I'm kind of questioning, because normally what we need to do with ever the year one is to plug a hole somewhere, and now it's saying I have a very specific amount of money for each one of the modes and I have to apply it to that regardless of whatever hole.
So you can't plug a hole, you first got to divide the money up by mode.
You know, we might not need, you know, the allocation we have for bike ped in that year, so it's like we're pigeonholing.
We have to force it to go to bike ped. That's.
Or any mode for that reason, like we might not have that much need for roadway projects that year, like all sitting with that amount of money in that.
I thought we said we could release that if there's no projects that are available. Is that not true?
I mean, in theory, I would go ahead and program in years 2 through 5 because I wouldn't be trying to take closeout money and immediately.
But so if it was on a bike ped project, Paul is saying that we can't allocate it just to a bike ped project in the future. If it's left over from a bike project, it must be divided into 10% for studies, however many percent for bike ped, a certain percent for transit, and a certain percent for roadways. In other words, you would divide it up and then allocate it into
The money has already been divided up, so we'll be dividing it up again.
Yeah, I would just, can we add this to the original source? That way you put it in the pot that it was to begin with, so you're not.
You might have a need where it said the original source with transit, but you have the need in roadways. Now you're saying, well, we can't use it because it needs to go. It's kind of ignoring the immediate terms.
Well, give me a suggestion. Solution.
the way it reads now is it's silent. It doesn't say that you have to divide it up.
Let's keep it silent.
Agreed. All right.
So what if we just change it to year 1 to 6?
I think year 2 through 5 is fine.
Well, year 6 is always going to be the call for projects years, or actually 5 and 6 would be the potential call for projects.
So folks, TAC members, this is where you all get to weigh in and vote and get this done quickly.
All right, let's
So
vote.
by sitting silently, you just prolong the meeting. Just say yes, no, or
I don't have too much issues with
what he said in this meeting, so.
I don't have,
This is actually
it's,
your main point after the last round.
we discussed it last round and that was dealt with. And we'll deal with it future
So
rounds.
year
I disagreed with what was
years
done.
2 to
but-
5 and years 6 following are already written up there. They're catered for. The only thing you're talking about now is Paul suggesting we make it from year 1.
And just my last quick question. So your comment on not putting it into year 1 was what?
So that is going to be, the year 1 is always going to be the next available year. So in the previous rounds, our year 1 was FY24. So usually it's going to be very close to when it's basically approved and implemented. Our thing is with FY21, we kind of know what our immediate needs are for next year. And if there's a hole that we're trying to plug, we might, if you divide it up by modes, you're going to say, okay, we're going to have to use 60% of roads. Those needs may not be there for that year. It might be completely different. In fact, all the roadway projects could be fully funded.
That's why you're suggesting year 2.
Yeah, because I can then push down, program it, but if you then come back and say, we have a need, we have this project that's underfunded or have need, I have flexibility, we have flexibility that we can basically plug holes as needed rather than fit a predetermined cut up to fill holes. And then I would have to come back and say, we have to change our methodology because I can't program it to fix a hole.
Okay, thank you.
John and I don't get a vote. You all who get the votes need to decide.
All right, so I will motion to leave it as is.
So I'll motion that to year 1.
Okay, so that's a sub. motion?
You have a motion on the floor from the chair, which is to leave it as is. Paul is suggesting an amendment to the motion, so you have to decide on the amendment and then you have to decide on the motion.
All right, so we'll vote on this amendment first. Any discussion? All those in favor say aye.
And then we're voting on what?
The substitution, your amendment.
Paul's amendment you have to vote on, you have to get a second to
Oh,
Paul's,
yeah, we need a second, sorry.
to Paul's motion.
We have a second.
Do we have a second to Paul's motion? To change it to year 1 to 5 instead of 2 to 5?
Second.
We have a second from Rod.
All right, all those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Saying no, no.
No.
All right, motion does not carry. All right, moving on to the motion, that original motion on the floor, to leave it as is. Do I have a second?
Second.
All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed?
Yeah, you vote.
Motion carries.
Next one.
So this is also, there's going to section 5.1, the first 5.1. And this is a minor issue, but it's under 8A. And the issue is basically if there are only 2 projects, you could get basically a 50-50 split between the 2 projects so that the first one doesn't get more than the second. We suggested doing maybe 55-45. I clarified that basically the sense is just where you have a situation where you have 3 or more projects.
So it's an addition to the current.
It's clarification of 8A.
So it's kind of an indirect thing. The way that our current limits are how we cap any project within it for the funding amounts is that no single project can get more than 50%. Therefore, if you have 2 projects that are requesting more than the 50% and they're the top scoring, each get 50% because you can never go over that 50% cap. If you have multiple projects, say, that are under that 50%, I keep working down the line. So if you have 2 small projects that are number 1, we fully fund those, and then the third project can get up to that 50%. So what it does is creates a quasi de facto situation that the top 2 projects will be funded up to 50% if they're both over the total amounts. So what Paul is saying is that maybe we switch it so that the top scoring project gets a little bit more than the second scoring project. My trick, and that's eligible, but that's also getting into now you're increasing, if the top scoring project gets 50% and the second project can get up to 45%, you might actually have a funding imbalance there.
A simplified version of what Paul is saying, I think, is any single project may not be allocated more than 55%. That achieves the same thing, right?
Well,
No.
It's 5% more than your cap.
Yeah.
But
Does anybody have an issue with increasing to 55% if there's only 2 projects down and making it so the other one is 45%?
I don't have any issue with it, but I'd rather make it less as opposed to more, because then you're changing a whole bunch of other stuff in the methodology.
Yeah, I'm happy with leaving it as 50%.
I'm saying, like, if you did like 50 and 45, then you would be okay, but if you go above the 50%, then you're changing stuff in other sections.
So that's only if you have 2. Basically, right now, the first one would get 50, then the second one would get 50, and then only 2.
Right,
If there are 3 or more, it wouldn't be like.
so we want.
Again, it's a minor issue. I mean, we just saw it as like a minor flaw in the methodology, but if there's not consensus, we're moving on. But I mean, something we thought should be changed. We're just trying to help the process.
I don't have any issue with it. I'm just trying to understand what you're just saying the better project needs to get more money. Is that what you're saying?
Yeah, that's what you would think.
I would quietly say, just looking at the previous rounds, typically the top 2, actually really the top 3, tend to be very, very, very close in scoring. There doesn't typically happen to be an issue where the top scoring project is leagues ahead of the second scoring project.
So I'm going to move on because it sounds like there's not support for that. Number 10. So this is a major issue. Something needs to be done with this. So there are 2 section 5.1s. And the second 5.1 was something that I thought we'd agreed to remove at a prior subcommittee meeting. And TAC.
To it, because we did remove the sections.
So, yeah, Carly, if you can just pull up 5.1. And just check, are there two 5.1?
Yeah, there are.
Okay.
It's a document, it's auto formatting.
So we're gonna change
He
the
said-
second 5.1. Okay. So which one do you want to remove, Paul? The second one?
Funding shortfall.
There. Okay, so
Well, the second one, I guess I thought that we weren't going to be kind of funding the existing projects beyond basically the 10% up to the $250,000 cap. Some of this looks like it's basically the old kind of language. So I guess if this was to be rechristened as like a 5.2, a lot of this I think would still have to come out.
So this is still allowing up to the 10%. It's mandating that if you want more than 10%, you have to resubmit an application. It still allows that the policy committee can review and request recommendations based on the requests. So it's still not removing the changes to what the policy committee can do. Scroll down, and then it's just the section that is unused funding, and it's that kind of changes to the funding. So
that was changed in that
I don't think it was in the tax recommendation to delete the whole section. I think we had segments that we deleted.
Correct.
it was changed in that it said that you have to, if you want more than the 10, you have to submit a new project, start again. That's the big change we did. Section. So you can't just ask for more money. You have to actually submit a new project. Just scroll up. It says that in, I think it's line 2 or something.
So should we just condense part of the second 5.1 into the previous 5.1? And basically delete the redundant parts?
So,
I think this is more role.
The header for the previous section, the first five.
And this is how projects are allocations and distributions.
Okay.
So, I mean, both have to change. They don't have to mirror each other, particularly with that. So this is just saying that we can do up to that 10% of the out year funding.
We do need a 10% rule.
Yeah, we need to have that in there.
But-
Let's say,
I mean, there's some language we can delete if you want to. Like,
policy, I mean,
At the end of the day, the policy committee can still decide whether or not.
Can we ask staff just to look over that item and eliminate any redundant language and ensure that the cap information is there? Is that
And maybe-
satisfactory, Paul?
Yeah, maybe call it 5.2.
yeah,
Not 2.5.
must call it 5.2.
auto matters. The only other thing I can think of is that you still need a mechanism that if an entity requests the 10%, it still comes before the tax. Like, in some ways it's automatic, but at the same time, it's not necessarily like stamped at the same point.
Right, just if there's, not saying eliminate all the language, if there's anything that you feel is redundant, remove it, but if not, just make it 5.2. Just ensure that it's clarity for your 10%.
Yes.
And John, just with that, basically there still would be like cap, right, with the SPG and the CMAC.
Yeah, the 4.5 remains.
You just can't say like, I want $10 million on this project.
Yeah, and I think that's what Ian just said, make sure that that language is specifically included in this section. So staff can just make that adjustment for 5.2.
So my only concern about this is, I'm happy to do that, but let's say we do that and one of you don't like the final result.
Oh, the language change?
Yeah.
Okay.
And then you want to block it and we need to take this to the policy committee.
Okay.
That's what concerns me.
Okay.
I mean, I would rather, if you want to delete 3 paragraphs now, just highlight the 3 paragraphs and delete them now. Then I don't have to worry about you later not being happy.
This gives like, speaking of like year one funding, like right now, the TAC can review the request for use from reserve grant or commit future funding. You do have, like, this is specifying a little bit of your maneuverability to kind of find solutions. If it's more than 10%, fix it.
Well, I don't think you have to explain the language. I think we're okay if we want to keep the language. If you want to, the captain is the only thing that we need to add. That way we don't take up time, Mr. Chair.
Go.
Paul, do you want to add a sentence about the cap?
Yes. I guess, so this is STBG, but if we have this issue with CMAC, which we might, it would be that we need to apply to that as
So
well.
the place that it needs to go in the language is here. If you look at this second paragraph, if the cost changes by more than 10% of the original allocated, that's where you want to put the cap in. Or
No, you don't want the cap there.
why not?
Because because they're going to be reapplying for funding. So all of a sudden you don't have that. You're not capping it to 250,000. Less than this. Where's the cap would be?
So if the cost changes by 10%, that's an existing project. That's
Yeah,
not a new
or,
project.
yeah, it changes by less than 10%.
So this is an existing project, John.
Mhm.
So if it changes by less than 10%, there's a process. If it changes by more than 10%, this is an existing project. And Paul's talking about a cap, so you need to put the cap here on the existing project. That's what this is, an existing project.
Yeah, but that becomes an application and it is triggered through the application
So
distribution.
then why do we need this?
It's telling you that if you go over 10%, you have to resubmit. But,
That's not what this language says. If you notify the administrator, you're saying that it must go back to a new application.
I mean, so here's the other, so yes, you do have that point. So we'll resubmit, but
So just
this
stop.
is a policy committee.
So just stop. John, Paul, I suggest that we delete everything from here down and we say, if it's more than 10%, you must submit a new application
Yes,
and get rid of all of this.
yes.
So can we just do that? So if the cost, annual allocation or scope of the project change by more than 10%, you must submit a new application and then delete the rest of this.
All right, everybody in agreement with that?
Yes.
All right, moving on.
Vote on that and it's done.
Yeah, we'll vote on these changes at the end unless there's anything else. All right,
I want to say like I need to double check issue that.
yep, we'll change it in CMAC as well.
It's only if you're requesting funding, that's the problem.
Do it now, please. Just delete
right.
it.
Moving on to CMAC comments.
Covered some of these under the STBG. There aren't as many. But also basically in section 3.1 and 3.2, remove the travel and management agency and
Paul.
is.
I don't think anyone else is in agreement with this item. Correct me if I'm wrong.
So this is the issue with basically, well,
Let's have a discussion before we move on.
So is this on CMAC or STGB? This,
we've switched to CMAX.
so we're now talking about CMAC. Okay.
We're done with STBG. Okay, so with the CMAC, basically we are very supportive of the 50,000 with the indexing for GW Ride Connect, which we all agreed to. We actually recommended it. But basically the issue is right now the section 3.1 and 3.2. It's not clear and it appears that basically GW Ride Connect could apply for 3 CMAC applications.
We don't support that.
No, that's not true, but if the language says so, we must fix it.
I thought you right next was eligible to apply.
Yes, that has not changed. They were eligible in the previous rounds of the applications, the previous methodologies.
Yeah, but not, GWI cannot get 3 new applications every year. And if the methodology says that, then I think that that's not what was intended.
So how many applications would they be able to submit?
So well, my understanding of where the methodology was the last time we left it is that GWRC or GWI Connect gets a 50,000 annual allocation. And if that funding is insufficient, they need to write a letter and demonstrate why that money is not sufficient. And then they can apply for additional funding. It's not for project funding. It's for whatever your needs are. It's not like you can submit 3 new projects and then get the application, then get 3 sets of allocations. If that is what you want, then that needs to be discussed as an amendment to the methodology, because the methodology didn't have that in last round.
Written right now is that you get the top allocation.
Yes,
There's index, there's an opportunity graph to request more funding.
correct.
But it also includes able to.
Plus 3 projects?
Yeah.
If that is the case, then that wasn't agreed to ever any.
Actually, that's the
Specifically.
exact same language as the previous. We have not changed who's eligible.
This was in the methodology we did back in
So
2020.
this is they're, as far as the policy committee is, they are currently an eligible applicant.
So my understanding is that the off-the-top allocation is for our day-to-day operations.
Yep.
This would allow us to apply for a specific project. Like if we wanted to provide like a van pool assistance program for this area or something, we could do that for this.
And-
Not separate from.
And based on that new methodology, you would basically have to be directed by the jurisdictions to provide that, or work in coordination to provide that to be an eligible recipient. So let's just say SPOSI and staff will work together, they direct you to apply, you're an eligible applicant for a specific program because you would be the potential TDM, Transit Demand Management Agency, that would be out for that. So that's the logic and reason behind that.
PRC would not unilaterally be able to. I would have to have the.
Right now, the policy committee says they are, they're not eligible applicant, but staff
No.
is directed.
I mean, well, we did apply, like, we partnered with Pennsylvania to apply for funds for leasing parking spaces. That's what I'm thinking of this as, would be like some specific activity in addition to what we already.
And this is quietly allowing an entity or a jurisdiction to have additional spots for that particular type of project. So they could come like the SPOTSI and for that project, once they do the WRC Right Connect, apply for that, that's the direction it goes.
Any further discussion on this item?
Jimmy, did you have any thoughts on this?
I don't have any issue with them being eligible applicant, just in general. I don't think we give them enough money, but that's just.
So there is this, like on page 23, does have that provision that they can require additional funds for staff. Okay, so I just want to go back to this application issue. So what we're saying is they can submit applications for more staff funding.
Correct.
I mean, submit applications, they're submitting them for basically either construction or operating transit projects, transit related projects.
I mean, there could be an administrative component. These parking spaces. But, yeah, that's my knowledge. Supporting our day-to-day operation.
Matthew, what are your thoughts on this?
I'm happy with how it is. That's what's been approved in the past.
We're not happy with what was approved in the past. That's what issues up now.
I know, we've discussed it, a lot of this in a lot of time at 4 different subcommittee meetings and 2 other TAC meetings. Moving on to the next item.
So this was just for basically, you could have a project that meets the CMAQ criteria, but not the CR criteria, or vice versa. Just having flexibility to be able to kind of cover.
Carly, can you pull up section 3.3 in the methodology, please?
So this is, generally speaking, almost everything that CR is eligible. Please correct me if I'm wrong here, is CMAQ and carbon reduction are very, very close. The only thing that I can find in the language of the document is that carbon reduction says there may be unspecified roadway projects that might not be. And then it's very, very vague at that comment, to the point of where I'm almost saying they're probably going to be 1-1.
It's 3.3, Charlie.
Is that big?
So I guess the question we had is, are we 100% positive of that? And if that is the case, then we're okay, but
Considering
we thought that the CR was restricted.
it is a little bit more restrictive, but where it says it's more restrictive for how we're using congestion mitigation air quality and this, there might be an edge case, but we're talking about $200,000. I can move things around to accommodate 200,000. It's an issue.
I think we dealt with on a case-by-case basis. Staff is confident that there's not too many differences. We can move on there. All right, on to the next item.
So this, again, was a relatively minor point, but basically with the plans, basically the transit agencies with TSP, that was not.
John, the transit fuel thing,
This is number 3. This is not the transit.
oh, I beg your pardon, sorry.
So it's just, the projects have to be within the region. Is that your requirement here?
Well, I mean, with CMAQ funding, yeah, we thought it should be the Fampo region, should be side. Fampo Road.
I think that is the general requirements already, but that's be with
So that was part of it, but the bigger part was just with TSP, it's not being listed.
I think that's easy enough to add as a plan. Does any of the transit agencies have any issues with that?
Nope.
No, Nick?
So can we just clarify what language you're adding?
Projects is up by.
So the, Paul's comment was what, on the previous page, he was concerned about?
This is section 3.3.
So you're concerned that the project would be in the Fampo region, would be an adopted GWR, COVRE project that's outside the region?
So I'm just curious, like, how would that handle, let's say we threw CMAQ money to rolling stock, right? Like the rolling stock doesn't stay within Fampo.
I mean,
No, if it,
I'm concerned this is a screening in project. I don't.
the rolling stock is serving Pampa localities in part.
Okay,
Well, even if it started in Fredericksburg and goes to DC, it started in.
yeah.
And you guys, I mean, I don't think you guys, maybe you do, maybe you don't, but do you know which trains when you buy them, if they go on Manassas or?
No, it's, and we don't make any
Yeah.
warranty that it's gonna be that, yeah, so.
Anyone have any issue with adding TSP?
No, nope, we considered it local plans,
I think that makes sense.
so I'm okay with adding it.
All right, we'll add TSP as a reference.
So we, at that point, we're adding comma T or TSP.
And I think on the other point, it's already in accordance that our projects have to be within Pampa. That's makes sense. To move this along, moving on to the next item, 4.2, transit fuel roadway. I think, John, has this been clarified?
Yeah, so,
So if it's been clarified, we're good then. We're good, okay. Number 5, bike ped. Paul, this is a bit of a long one. You wanna?
So this is section 4.3. Let me just get there first.
Let me clarify very briefly. Number 5 and number 6 and number 7 look to be the last ones. 8 to 11 have already been discussed, correct?
I think we need to do 6 and 7. I think everything after that.
All right, perfect.
And then number 11, that was the major one. That was
And we made that change, yeah.
just 5, 6.
So number 5 is in regards to supportive network infrastructure metric.
There. That's how it is now. Paul, just go through your suggested change.
So that's the question we had on this one is basically most bike ped projects, they'll likely be along roadways as opposed to crossing roadway. And just the metric was kind of giving you benefits to crossing the roadway. And I mean, we're probably not going to build very many bridges over basically roadways or just crossing the roadways. So I guess maybe one question is if a project is along a roadway, does it still get credit in this metric? Or if not, how can we maybe adjust it?
But can someone just point me to on the screen where it says cross?
Overcoming obstacles. So what this is doing to a lesser extent is saying, if you're having a project, particularly along a roadway, then it is. If along that segment, you're crossing a 3-lane road, you get extra points in this category for crossing a 3-lane road. So it's not just, for identifying a stream, so you're adding in bridge construction costs. This is kind of offsetting the cost effectiveness. Limited access is saying that if you're doing it within your scope and you're crossing a particular barrier, a barrier that would be restrictive for users, then we're giving you additional points. So the alternative way is, let's just say you do your project scope so you stop at that barrier. You will score lower than if you decide to extend the scope that you go past and include this barrier. So if you're crossing an intersection, instead of building to that intersection and just dropping it, building a crossing, this is then incentivized to go ahead and make that crossing rather than deadhead it before.
I see this existing scoring methodology benefiting like projects. Let's say you're widening a roadway and adding a multi-use path, and you come to another major roadway, crossing over and finishing that connection.
And if you're crossing an identified stream, even if it's along a roadway, because granted you're going to have a culvert or something that you're going to have to adopt or modify. That's more than that if you didn't. And say if you do have that, it's just incentivizing. Go ahead and make that connection over a potential barrier rather than kind of cutting and avoiding it. So. And of course, if you're having to deal with a railroad, I think you should get more points because dealing with the railroad and a crossing is probably a big ask. I don't really expect that to be common. That's a major item.
I would just say that like absent an existing bridge or tunnel over or under the railroad, it's going to be very challenging to accomplish that. So that might be like the holy grail 15 points, but projects are probably not going to get
off.
Yeah.
But your cost effectiveness, you're going to get dinged later on for that because that's expensive.
Yeah.
If they can get it done, it's worth every penny.
So, I mean, we're still doing, this is a big item, so you're getting still connections for, local adjacent activity centers, 2% if you're within a smart transit stop. So it's just kind of a multiplier effect being built on if you're making connections versus not making.
So again, our comment was just that most bike ped projects will not be eligible for that top portion. And was that our intent? It's like everyone else thinks this is a good idea.
I think crossing 3 lanes of traffic is, I think a lot of projects are going to hit that, even 4 or 5 lanes. It'll be.
I'm thinking of all of the projects we considered for TAP, almost every single one of them had some sort of crossing.
Bridge or tunnel.
Or lanes of traffic, yeah. An intersection.
Yeah. So I guess maybe I should ask the clarifying question. So is this overcoming a major obstacle? Would that include a safe at-grade pedestrian crossing, signalizing it or something like that? So it wouldn't just be a bridge or a tunnel. It could be an intersection treatment that allows people to safely get across.
John, just for point of clarification, do we include turn lanes?
Yes,
Yeah.
Go ahead, put it on I consider that a lane of travel.
Works for me. That's what I was asking. All right.
Yeah.
Yeah, this is not my bailiwick.
Yeah.
Defer to you.
Carrie?
Would it make sense to clarify that language a little bit?
I will more than definitely.
Not stopping the facility. That sort of thing. So basically, it would be incentivizing.
Go ahead and make that.
Safe crossing. Whether that be an intersection or.
So can we add that language now since we're all here?
Well, it says there 3 lanes of traffic.
Which is that be?
So I'm not giving, if you're just crossing a 2-lane road, I'm not giving extra points for that. So standard 2-lane undivided road, not. If you have 3 lanes of traffic, yes.
Yeah. Yes.
Yeah, including turn lane and
Yeah.
center lane, center turn lane.
Well, put it here, don't put it there. Put it up here, because you don't have to change it. I want to just put it.
All right,
Because I consider it traffic.
moving on to the next
So-
item.
So you added, wait, no, you need to agree to this language, including turn lanes and center
Yeah,
Center turn lane.
Should we add?
those are official.
turn lanes.
But I would say, I mean, as the suicide lane, I would consider a turn lane, but I know that's.
Okay.
What do you mean by center lane? Can you please
Twin left
specify
turn.
center turn lane, not just center
What?
lane? There you go.
Yes. Oh, yes, absolutely.
Can
That
you
was
add,
right.
can you add that, please? I want to clarify that language because I think Paul's point is accurate. If you can get more points by doing an accurate crossing and that language is clear there, then
So just add the words now, live, in
Mhm.
the meeting. Just say what words you want there.
go ahead.
They want to make sure that you're including accurate.
Including turn lanes, comma, center turn lanes and accurate crossing.
Yes.
Is that helpful, Paul, at all?
Yes. It's good.
That's definitely.
At grade crossings, there you go.
All right,
Everybody happy with that?
Make a motion to approve it.
second. She's motioning to approve the language.
They had it.
Do I have a sec? Oh, we don't need a motion.
Yeah.
We're all fine. That's fine. All right, next item, number 6. So Paul, I believe we had come to an agreement on this item at the last subcommittee meeting. And we made a couple changes to it and everyone was agreed upon the criteria. All right, moving on to item number 7. I'll just say I am in agreement with this criteria.
Yeah, and I'll just add like, there was a recent change, the state CTV basically changed the TAP process and cap it in kind of mid-July. Basically, the lifetime cap is like 3.125 million. So with that, that makes it hard to let them stick on our TAP projects. So we wanted to try to have the CMAC be potentially or CR be like a supplement to that. So that was the intent of the comment that we made.
Didn't they also make a change that projects in TAP they must fully fund the projects in TAP?
Yes.
Okay, so it's gonna be a little difficult to, you're either gonna get no funding or all funding, right?
Well, you have other locality who basically kind of CMAC funding or something.
Already on the project, you're saying?
Right, right.
You're in the correct section.
And then you're playing this with TAP projects.
Be counted down here, I don't want to double dip on the scoring.
Yep.
This is where the TAP, like if you're pulling in TAP money, it would count in percentage. I would consider that leverage funds just because FAMPO isn't administrating.
So can you please put the words tap in there at the relevant spot, John?
Percentage of what? Committed funding from applicant, divided by, okay, committed funding, comma,
Including tap,
including.
including tap funding. That good?
That's good. Yeah, thanks.
That was all of the comments under CMAC. There are several others, but we already made those changes under STVG. We'll previously discussed them under that previous STVG section.
So we must still apply the same
Yep, those changes will be applied
to
as we
CMAC.
discussed when we went through STVG.
Okay,
So do we need a motion to approve all these, or I guess?
you need a motion to endorse this entire methodology to the policy committee, including all the changes you made today.
So I'll make more motion to endorse to the policy.
Okay, do I have a second?
I can second.
All right, we have a second. Any further discussion? All right, all those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? All right, motion carries. Moving on to item number D, we previously discussed this. I know Bassam had a question on the map.
Request, like that we get a.
Sure.
You had a question? Yeah.
This is just a clarification about what this matter all about. What are we supposed to do? That you mentioned that this information came from local zoning, land use, And
So you-
all depends on the VC.
So
ratio.
you don't have to do anything with this. We're just offering it to
Right,
our
but
localities as a help.
It's a follow-up. So when we see this, let's say we want to take this to our offices and we have development coming and things like that.
Yes.
And I'm assuming that these colors will change as more growth coming, more development coming, these colors will change.
Yeah.
So-
So we're not going to update this every week.
I understand that, but the question is.
But yes, it will, as you change your zoning. This is based on zoning. So as you change your zoning, then those colors would change.
So to tackle this issue that we have, I think it's scary when you see things like that. So are we saying that we need to pass this information to the people who review plans and things like that, saying we need additional, let's say, right of way, we need to more, intersection right of way, or, things like that? Are we gonna expand into this map, or this is it?
So FAMPO has done this, and apart from a couple of tidying up things, we are not going to expand on it now, right? But it's one of the things that your planning boards should really be looking at when they approve zonings is this map, because it spurs the thought, what is this new development going to do to the roads or to the transit operations? And you need to think about that. One of the things, just as a broad comment, in the United States, in about 1925, the US had the largest urban electrified rail network in the world. And the US then pulled it apart and threw it away, right? But what not everybody realizes is that it was built not by taxpayers. It was built by real estate developers. So back then, they were contributing to build this urban light rail system so that they could build suburbs further out and further out and further out from the center. So they funded the transit because not everyone had a car. So there was an onus on developers to build the transportation if you're going to build further out. When that stopped, now developers contribute very little to the transportation system when they build new developments, especially large developments. So if they wanted to build far out, like is happening now across Spotsyl's border in is it Orange County, Paul, or Culpeper? Back in the old days, they'd have to build some sort of transportation out to those houses from shopping areas. Now they don't. They just put up their housing. And so there is not the connections being made, and suddenly the general taxpayer now has to go and build those connections, right? And I know that the law limits what you can do about that, but you should at least be looking at these sorts of density and transportation maps to say, hey, what are you doing about transportation to the new development? Because there are needs, and you need to at least apply your mind to how you can do that. So this is supposed to give those general thoughts to planning officers, planning boards, zoning boards, and that kind of thing to say, and the federal government requires us to do exactly this as an MPO, is to start trying to get localities and MPOs to work together on linking urban development to transportation.
Thank you, Ian.
That's all.
Moving on to item E, TAC bylaw amendment for online meeting.
Yes, we just want to point your attention to some minor amendments in the TAC bylaws in Articles 3 and 7. Like clarified earlier, our community engagement and equity plans takes the place of a public participation plan. So we've just made that language update in Article 3, and then in Article 7, we've made that change as well, again here in Section 2, and then in Section 7, we've just updated the FOIA requirements and for virtual meetings during a state of emergency, and we've added Section 8 for virtual meetings, so the TAC chair and FAMPO administrator can host a all virtual meeting for the TAC 3 times a year, up to 3 times a year.
So, do we need an endorsement of this? I believe we do.
No, you have to actually vote to approve
Yeah,
it.
or
Not
vote,
just
motion
to-
and endorsement. Motion to approve, do I have a second?
Second.
Any discussion? All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Motion carries. Awesome.
Fantastic. That is the most useful amendment we've made to the
Now-
TAC bylaw in 100 years.
And now our favorite presentation today, art scale.
All right. All right, round 6 is upon us, even though it feels like round 5 was yesterday.
Presentation, so we might.
As most of you know, in July, the CTV staff recommended some big changes, round 6. The ones we're going to talk about today is project types funded by high priority project statewide funding. This affects the projects submitted by MPOs and PDCs. They also recommended eliminating the funding step 2. There are 3 funding steps currently. They recommended modifying the land use factor in scoring and lowering the number of applications. These are all potential changes that have been recommended by the CTV staff. The first one, restricting project types funded by high priority project statewide funding, was brought about because during their review, they found out during the last 5 rounds of Smart Scale, there were more and more small projects being funded by HPP. So high priority project funding is supposed to be statewide priorities. And so to get back to the spirit of that, they have decided that they want to refine the definition, which is largely implemented through their policies. The current policy just talks about where the projects are located on corridors of statewide significance or regional networks, but not what they are, which is why we have benefited by having our bike ped projects funded by HPP and other small projects, intersections and things like that. But now they're going to consider defining it. So perhaps feature types like a new capacity highway, managed lanes, interchanges, passenger rail stations, things like that. In other words, no principal bike ped, no intersection improvements. And I want you all to think about all of our round 5 projects, this region, all of our regional projects, the locality projects, of course, the regional ones. Would any of them have been funded if this change had been made?
So the Route 217 widening project would have,
Potentially, yeah. Likely.
that's adding new capacity, that's smart.
But our Route 1 bicycle and pedestrian shared use path would not have, our VCR trail would not have. The turn lanes, Stafford would not have. But remember our BWRC project for Eskimo?
Oh, American
Yeah,
Legion.
that one, yeah, American Legion would not have.
That was adding capacity. That likely would have been eligible. It's adding turn lanes, it's adding capacity to an intersection.
The intersection, is that a huge regional project? Maybe, maybe not.
It's on Route 1.
Yes.
So the biggest question, I think, for this, with all the pipeline studies, is basically the
Major intersection projects, you have like a quadrant roadway or some kind of.
innovative intersection or some of the other kind of types of innovative intersection projects, would those be eligible? And you would think with just all the investment the state has put into the pipeline studies, you would want those to be eligible, but if they're not, then I'll say a lot of the pipeline study work that's being done is not eligible for the high priority, which would change the calculus on what a project kind of mix would be.
It's if this goes through, which it hasn't yet, these are significant changes. They're going to have large impact.
I mean, a lot of these things will still be eligible for locality submissions.
Right.
For GGP, but it might change a lot. So that's something to think about. The other thing that they're talking about doing is eliminating funding step 2. So right now, the current process is step 1, they fund the top scoring projects within each district eligible for district grant funds, using those funds until the remaining funds are insufficient to fund the next highest scoring project. And then step 2, they fund the top scoring projects within each district that would have otherwise been funded with those funds, but were not because they're only eligible for HPP funds. Using HPP funds as long as the cost doesn't exceed the total amount of district grant funds available. So that's often MPO projects or PDC projects. So that is what happened to some of our smaller local projects that got funded with HPP funds last time. They're talking about eliminating this stuff.
Step 3 funds projects with a benefit relative to smart scale score, that's the important part here, greater than an established threshold based on the highest project benefit using HPP funds until the funds are insufficient. So if they remove this, this will mean that all of our regional projects have to compete statewide. This smart scale score is a benefit divided by the smart scale money request.
Cost.
Yes, the smart scale, the amount we're requesting from smart scale.
So just to clarify, step 3 has a greater emphasis on
That's what I'm getting
the
to.
cost.
That's what I'm getting to. So what this is going to mean is that leverage funding is going to matter a lot more in this round, which is going to put us up against places like Hampton Roads in Northern Virginia that have a lot more access to leverage funding than we do. All of our projects.
Better have some really good projects.
Are you thinking about the significance of this change? They're ripping out step 2. So there are only 2 steps now, step 1 and step 3. And step 3 has a greater emphasis on larger projects and on leverage funding, because it's never going to say leverage funding anywhere in the documentation. What it's going to say is that we're omitting step 2 and going to step 3. So it's implicit. It's implicit in step 3 that there's a greater emphasis on cost, which means that if you don't put any funds down, it's going to be harder to get that fund approved. And there's an emphasis on bigger projects, not small projects. So if your project is one little intersection, you're going to struggle to get it funded.
I thought that was one of the issues raised, that like the leveraged funding projects were getting funded by smart scale money at a bigger rate, and that it was disadvantaging the non-leveraged funding.
This is going to make it worse.
So this will make it worse. So
There's a small advantage in the CTB presentation.
Yeah.
That's also factoring in, there's a lot of small projects.
Yeah.
So this is all of a sudden going to flip.
We have done very well in the last few rounds because we've got
the small projects. Yeah.
Projects.
Yeah.
But now they're saying, oh, we're funding too many small projects with HPP.
So now with only the big projects, you're going to need to come to the table with some money.
Exactly.
And this is really going to be.
And remember, FAMPO doesn't have a tax base, so we have no money to put on leveraging FAMPO or GWRC projects. The leverage funding at the moment would have to come from the jurisdictions. So just think about that for a moment.
Yeah. Sorry to bring you all this news today. The next thing they're talking about is modifying the land use factor in screening, because they found that in their review, the funded projects received a significant portion of their overall benefit points from land use. They thought this was an outsized influence. 77 projects funded out of 152 had over 50% of their benefit score from land use. Of those 40 projects funded, over 80% of the benefit score came from land use. So they ran some scenarios with all of the previous recommendations I just talked about, and they added modifications to the land use factor, and their final recommendation of the July meeting was to consider future congestion, changing the HPP eligible project types to what I described before, and eliminating step 2. And then they modified the land use and they split its weight to a mix of safety and congestion. This reduced the small projects funded by 46%, 50%. Look what it did to bike ped projects. I'm the bike ped coordinator, so this matters to me a lot. Reduced by 75% to 13%. So the average total cost of funded projects raised from 15.1 million to 21.8 million. And the total request of funded projects raised from 10 to 13 million. So that removed 39 funded projects across the state. So you can see how it changed the mix of projects. It didn't really affect highway, but really changed bike ped, really changed bus and transit. And then this is how it affected area types. We are currently area B.
Curie, with the bus transit or just transit in general for rail, like, do you think is the intent of the changes to reduce those types of applications for the high priority as well?
Nothing like that was said.
Lots of negative comments were made about too many bike ped projects.
Yes,
funded.
that was definitely explicitly said.
And they clearly want to reduce the number of bike ped projects that get funded. And the Secretary for Transportation is saying we should only be funding bike ped projects that take people to work. In other words, no leisure activities should we be bothering to fund bike ped projects. So no trails, only like bike to work.
But they didn't, nothing was said about transit, really.
I will say this will make it so if like we wanted to submit a, maybe not this one, but one of the previous factors, it'll make it so if we wanted to, if Fredericksburg Go wanted to submit a, improvements to some of the bus stops, would not be eligible. It'd have to be a new, I don't remember what the language
It
was.
probably have to be a high capacity project because it'll be.
Yep.
Overall, the impression I get is that it's shifting smart scale to bigger roadway projects.
Yeah.
That's the general direction that these changes are.
And this discussions on land use during the CTV meetings didn't seem to understand land use in the way that we did.
I think they do have a point though, that 75% of the score, that's an
Very
issue,
high.
but
Very high, so maybe some reconfiguring. This is still being debated a lot within the CTV, so we'll see how it ends out. So, in short, we definitely need a different strategy than what has been successful heretofore. So local and regional projects are not as interchangeable as in the past. Sometimes we've been like, you've used up all your slots, we'll take this one and put it as a regional project. We can't, that won't work anymore. So we need larger projects, clearly demonstrating a regional scope and considering the big picture. Bike ped projects have to be coupled with roadway projects, and they clearly have to link to larger regional networks. Potentially a lower number of applications means regional consensus is even more essential than usual success, considering implications of land use metric being split between congestion and safety. And one thing, if you guys don't know this already, we've been talking about new roads and how new roads will be scored. And we got some confirmation that new roads will be using the parallel routes. So the needs that COSS needs on parallel routes. So if you're building a new road to help with I-95 congestion, you use I-95 needs.
But yeah, so the problem is that new roadways, typically, how do you get a score for safety, right? How do you get a score for congestion? Well, you've got to look at the parallel roads that you're relieving. So if you're relieving the crash rate on the road next door, or you're relieving the congestion on the road next door, you put those metrics in and indicate such, and then it doesn't get screened out because it doesn't have a VTrans need. It does have a VTrans need because it's alleviating the pressure on the road next door. So you can get new roadway segments funded by using that methodology.
So that's where we're at. And just to start the conversation about what regional projects we might want to submit, FAMPO staff put these together in no particular order. Everything started. And I'm going to take a seat after your questions.
Well, I just, because we need to bug out in a few minutes, but I wanted to say that, and this hasn't been, discussed and decided upon internally, but VRE has some funding gaps identified for our end of Fredericksburg line rail yard or our crossroads yard. And so I raised the question, is round 6 smart scale funding for a fairly significant amount of money to address those capital needs as well as potentially additional rolling stock. Would that be, a project that FAMPO would endorse or would consider? And I think I was reviewing these potential changes last week, and for us, it actually kind of benefits us because it's tending to put things in favor of these larger capital intensive projects. In the past, it's been very challenging to get rolling stock outside of like formula funds because, it's a rail car is like $6 million. So that is one, I'll just throw that one in the mix is, you know, because that would come with capacity increases, so you'd be able to carry more people on the parallel roadways, you know, move more people off the parallel roadways and onto VRE, but that was something we were considering putting in for. No decisions have been made internally yet, but
Yeah,
like that out.
certainly something to put into our mix of.
Yeah.
I mean, the question is going to be at the end of the day, we only get 2 slots for FAMPO and 2 slots for GWRC. We have a total of 4. And last time we had a total of 8. So it's now going to become a game of big projects competing with big regional projects. And we're going to have to pick like a very small number. So, I mean, I think that your project will be a big one. And I don't think there's any reason why you can't submit it. The question is, at the end of the day, we're going to have to convince the policy committee and the GWRC board that this one is better than these other 3 we've got, right? That's going to be the math. But all of this is assuming that all of these changes get made. And as you know, with politics, we're probably going to get many of these made, but probably not all of them. And we don't know at this stage which ones are not going to be approved. We simply don't know, which is why to produce a final list right now is a bad thing to do. But we do need to start putting lists of projects on the table so that we can start thinking about them. And because in a month or 2, we're going to have to start saying these are our list. But I know this sounds terrible, but I don't want us to pick these projects too early until we have more clarity on these metrics, because we might shoot ourselves in the foot if we go all in on project A, and then that's actually going to score right at the bottom because they, you know, we just don't know what they're going to vote for.
Even you guys want the projects in the next portal in November? Is that correct?
Yes, but that doesn't commit you to, as for Martindale, so you can put all your projects that way and have them all ready.
We can put a whole bunch of concepts in it.
Yes.
So we can put 12 in,
So that's my plan.
and then later on whittle them down to what we actually can submit under the new rules.
Yes, sir.
So maybe we need to get a long list ready for November, and then we later on, you know, pull out the ones that don't meet the new criteria when we get them.
Yeah.
So with regards to the pipeline studies that the state has going on, like what's the deadline to decide, I guess, what alternatives from those studies we're interested in committing to?
Really don't have to have those until that month ahead of the application. Because they'll be fully developed up with, you know, smart scope readiness. So yeah, those type of decisions, you'll have that kind of time frame. And presumably, we're going to have a decision in plenty of time to not be pushing it back to that point. But we don't know either.
Our local electeds, are we provided any sort of feedback to CDP? Are we just kind of knowing that they're going to do what?
So our people went to the July meeting and spoke their minds,
Okay.
and on the record said we don't like most of the changes.
Great.
And we've sent a letter
Okay.
to the secretary saying, please don't reduce the slots because we think that's the worst outcome for us. And please add a middle category where we can get a couple more slots. And that is still being debated. They haven't made a decision, and I think they will debate it some more at their next meeting.
Okay.
So, I mean, my guess is, Chair, we should keep this as a ongoing item on the TAC agenda, but some months we might have nothing to talk about, right? There may be nothing new, but certainly we should be thinking about putting this on the next 3 TAC agendas, maybe in a smaller discussion, but just to keep the discussion moving forward. As we get information, we'll feed it to the TAC.
So perhaps, Carrie, the next presentation will be whatever is discussed at the next CTB meeting in
Yeah,
a couple of weeks.
yeah.
Let's pull that and discuss it. Same thing in October. I believe they're supposed to have final recommendations in November. I think that's what's currently on the website. And then maybe October. And then there should be a public information meeting, a virtual meeting in probably November as well, with final approval in December.
So we can keep doing a short presentation on what the TAC decides each month.
I think I have time, like another presentation, once there's something new. But Stephen was telling me that VDOT has given them their view, right?
Which is?
Still a lot of discussion, well, I'll share that at this point, because that's going to be left to Marcy and her counterparts a lot. I think they'll have a lot of input.
And they'll carry, the information they've gathered from groups such as yourselves and other localities and everyone else. They'll carry that message. That's all I can say.
I hope my colleagues on the TAC won't disagree with me, but I have started saying to staff at FAMPA that we would like to get VDOT input on the regional projects once we know more from the CTB, because we're going to have to try and do that guessing game, right? Which of these is going to do well? And I don't know what the rest of the TAC feels, but I certainly feel like the district should at least give us an opinion. We might not agree with you, but I'd certainly like to hear the district's opinion, because you have a 43% success rate or something of projects being approved. So think with us about the new criteria and how that's going to play out, because, we may or may not agree with you, but I think we should at least have your opinion closer to the time, because we really are in a game of guessing which projects in the future are going to score well, in the next round at least.
All right. Anything else on Smart Scale? Going once?
Done.
Not going anymore. All right. Correspondence. Please.
Yeah, there's not a lot of three items you've seen, because it's the VAMPO. The reason why this VAMPO letter is here to show you that I raised the concerns that we had with VAMPO. They included them in this letter, and there's the VAMPO letter saying that those 4 things the MPOs in the state do not like. So there's the letter. There's the certification by FHWA and FTA for the DC, the TPB, basically, just for information. We participated in that.
Rest of it is certification.
And that's the certification review summary.
All right. Staff reports.
Don't believe we have anything new that we haven't already covered.
All right. Member reports. Anybody has any items other than A and B, or A and B that are mentioned here? If not, we are good to go.
Just really quick,
Yeah.
I wanted to say thank you to FAMPO and GWRC staff and OmniRide for the baby card that you gave me and all the nice comments. So I wanted to publicly say thanks all. So I appreciate it. He's almost 5 months old, and I will show you all later. Thank you for the card.
Congratulations again.
Thank you.
All right. Do we have a motion to adjourn?
Yes.
All right.
Yes.
Second.
All those in favor?
Aye.
All right. Opposed? None. All right. We're adjourned.
Right.